And call to order the City of Norco City Council regular meeting. The clerk could roll call, please.
Yes. Council Member Greg Newton?
Here.
Council Member Berwin Hanna?
Here.
Council Member Kevin Bash?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Robin Grunmeyer?
Yes.
And Mayor Ted Hoffman?
Yes.
All present. Thank you.
Present, sorry about that. Are there any speaker cards for closed session items?
No, sir.
Okay. We'll recess to the closed session.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to reconvene the public session. The City of Norco City Council regular meeting. Reports of action taken in the closed session. City Attorney.
Yes, the council considered those matters listed on the agenda, and there are no reportable actions.
Thank you. Please stand with me. The Pledge of Allegiance by Councilmember Greg Newton, and then followed by the invocation by Pastor Dick Hillary. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
My son, attend to my words, incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not depart from your eyes, keep them in the midst of your heart. For they are life to those who find them and health to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. I feel very honored to live in a city that honors patriotism and spirituality. Father God, I thank you for this city. I thank you for the influence that it has brought in my life. I thank you for the privilege of living here where integrity and worship and spirituality are the byword of all things. Thank you, Father. It is wonderful. And I pray that this board, I pray that every officer, I pray that every citizen of this town find its way to understand and realize that this is a city that honors God and honors our flag and all that they're in. And Father, I pray that you will lead them in such ways that their path of righteousness will make this city even greater, and that it'll become a city that is envied throughout the entire nation. I am grateful, Father. You are good, and Father, I pray that you lead us in that path of righteousness, that you may be glorified in all we do and all we say. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dick. There's a Navy veteran from Korea and in World War II. We thank you, Mr. Hillary. Thank you. Business appreciation honoree. I see Mike. Yep. Step on up here.
Yes, this honoree for this month is Browning Automotive Group. It has been almost 7 years since Browning has come to Norco. The Browning Group purchased the dealership in Norco from Fram Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram in April of 2011. They currently employ 75 professionals here at their location in Norco. Today, the group consists of 14 franchises in 9 locations, employing over 700 professionals. The keys to their success has been and always continued to be representing quality products while treating all customers with respect, honesty, and courtesy. As far as supporting our community, they continue to support with a variety of sponsorships. Norco Summer Concerts in the Park, Norco Christmas Parade, Norco Horse Week, Mounted Posse Rodeo and Events, Norco High School Athletics, Norco Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Norco FFA. They're also one of the top-selling Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram dealers in California, ranked number 10 in Ram truck sales. They were just awarded the Fiat Chrysler Automotive Customer First Award, and they're only one of 10 dealerships in California to get this award for 2018. Chris, would you like to come forward, sir? Chris, it is our honor to present this for the company's investment in Norco and the long-term partnership with the city, as well as its generous, enthusiastic support of local events. Thanks, sir. You're going to make us stand in front. You going to stand in front of the podium? Yeah, we'll stand in front. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You got it.
We want to thank Diane German for sitting in tonight as the Assistant Deputy Deputy City Clerk, as our Cheryl is under weather tonight. All right, moving right along. City Council business items. City Council communication reports on regional boards and commissions. Berwin, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not much to report tonight. RCTC will be having their next I-15 informational workshop. I believe it's next Wednesday, the 28th, at Eagle Glen Golf Course, in case you missed the one they had in Norco a couple of weeks ago. On Vector, something new has been brought to our attention, besides the danger of mosquitoes, is the canine flu. Said the central part of California right now is the hot spot for this. There's 72 cases at this time, and it's not seasonal. Your dog could catch it at any time. And I believe the strain number is H3N2, and the good news about it, you can't catch it from your dog. You got your own type of flu. But that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Berwin. Robin?
Nothing to report.
Greg?
I'd like to give up my time and ask you, Mayor, to acknowledge Lieutenant Brake and our two deputies in the back. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's all yours. Tell us what you guys did.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of City Council. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the support and acknowledgement. Anytime we have a situation like this, first of all, I would just like to make clear that I think everyone knows that I don't do the investigation. It really has nothing to do with me, but everything to do with the deputies who have their feet on the ground. So on Monday, we had a national holiday, and it was during that time we became aware of a series of threats directed at a local college. Through our investigation, the threats were identified as coming from a residence in the city of Norco. At the point where we discovered we had some credible threats, we called in a number of resources that are available to the Sheriff's Department, which started with our Special Investigation Bureau, which led to the Joint Terrorism Task Force and included an FBI embedded within that group. There were probably about 20 of us here in the office during the day. It was a long day. Our deputies worked over 17 hours. They never let this investigation go due to the sensitivity and the public safety issue. Ultimately, through the investigation, with the leads developed, with the resources we had, with the feet we had on the ground, we were able to identify the exact house and location and get a search warrant. And what that search warrant resulted in was, first of all, the arrest of the suspect without incident, which is good news. There was nobody harmed. And then we recovered an AR-15 and 2 pistols. Included with that AR-15 and the 2 pistols was over 400 rounds of ammunition. And based on the threats that were made with the social media and the tools and the capability to carry out those threats, the case will be referred to the district attorney for prosecution. That individual was arrested and taken to the Robert Presley Detention Center, where he was booked on terrorism threats as well as a felon in possession of illegal weapons. So I would like to thank Deputy Darrell Robertson and Deputy Matt Fotcher, who are here with us tonight, for their investigative efforts. They worked over 17 hours to bring this case to a successful conclusion, and it was all a result of their just basically good police work. That's what it came down to. Stand, gentlemen, to be acknowledged.
Today, we met with Congressman Calvert, and we shared him the story with it. Very appreciative, because you guys did exactly what you're supposed to do. You didn't shove it off, and we're very appreciative for what you did here and at averting a possible tragedy. So again, from the Congressman's office, thank you. All right, Kevin?
I don't have a lot. Today I attended the luncheon for the Chamber of Commerce, and the speaker they had there was terrific. You know, that chamber is really doing a good job, and I would encourage anybody who's not a member and has a business to join. They're doing a lot of stuff. One of the things just to make people aware of is the 12th annual military ball for the Norco ROTC is coming up in May. April 19th, I sit on the board of advisors for the president of Norco College. April 19th, we're having a huge dinner with the president at Silver Lakes. Very excited about that. And then I was out at Silver Lakes over the weekend. And for anybody who doesn't know about the equestrian stuff going on out there, it is fantastic. I was there Sunday, and in the middle of all the soccer players, there were 3 different disciplines going on. The day before, they had over 100 horses, and then the 3 disciplines on Sunday, everybody was having a good time. It's a reasonable price, and it was very, very impressive. And once again, I'm hearing about all these scholarships that are going out of there, the kids that are playing soccer. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, I was busy. This weekend, I went up to Ingalls Park, and if you got a chance and realize what we do up there at the park, there was a large team rope, and it was only a one-day deal. This thing came from a 3-day team rope into a 1-day, but we still had Jerry Lindy and his people put on over 300 teams and 180 barrel racers up there, and it shows that Norco is a place to come. And the good thing about it, the reason they had so many, was family. Moms, dads, daughters, sons, they're all together, and that's what we're all about. So I just want to point that out. I just want to remind people of the high school gala coming up on March 24th to honor the 50 years of existence in Norco High. They started in 1967, and the staff, along with some volunteers, are trying to put a good thing, and it's going to be held March 24th. It starts at the high school, and then we're going to move to do a commemorative memorial at the Veterans Memorial in the afternoon at 4, and followed by a dinner at 6 p.m., and that information is online. Getting down to the nitty-gritty, met with the folks over at the California Rehabilitation Center. A lot of comments, but the most interesting one, the state has decided they are going to audit the oldest 12 prisons in the state of California. With it, and they're looking at to see what are the most cost-effective of these facilities. This report will be done and be available by December of 2018. It will be up to the legislatures in 2019 to decide what they're going to do with this report as far as maintaining or keeping these prisons open or closed. And CRC will be on that list. So that is them. They do a lot of donations to the city, don't get me wrong. They're officers do a good job here. It's just, that's something the state has to do, and that was a surprise to us that they were going to do that. The other thing is I met with a lot of other mayors in the county through the League of Cities last week. All of them have the same concern that we do, dealing with the unfunded liabilities through CalPERS, differences in council. Most of them have gone through and done the districting situations and been through it, shared with them the information that we're going through. They gave me some support and some condolences at the same time. And then they also talked about upcoming items on the June ballot, and we'll be discussing that a little later or as we go along. Some of them are very important things you should be looking at. Prop 69, along with the parks and water funding bills. Those are the highlight ones that you should be taking a look at and seeing what how you want to vote on those. And then finally today, Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer and myself, along with the city staff and city manager, met with the Congressman Calvert and his staff. Very interesting meeting. We had, and kudos to Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer, because when she thinks something's wrong, she lets them know it. And she's out there, if you don't know it, she was out there fighting to make sure the funding comes up from the federal government to the state for our kids and make sure that that goes to the right places. So I think I saw them take notes, so maybe they'll check into it. We did a few other things. We discussed with them several topics, like of course the California Voter and Writing Act and the feds. We talked to them about the extended listing of the Norconian property on the National Register of Historic Places. And then one of the things we talked about was looking for grant funding for the water initiatives to support the city's recycled water projects in the future. I think Chad and Andy got some good leads going that way, so we can maybe talk about finding some federal grants that we could look at to help fund these projects, and along with trying to help our Interstate 15 out for future improvements as we go through. So with that, I'll move on to item number 2, City Council consent calendar.
I'd like to pull C and F.
C and F. And Kevin pulls E. Robin? Berwin, anything? Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the rest? Or first and second?
Thank you. We'll take a roll call vote. The system's not working with me.
System's not working, okay. Go back to the old school.
It's just not cooperating. Okay, Councilmember Newton?
Yes.
Sorry. Councilmember Pash?
Yes.
Councilmember Hanna? Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer?
Yes.
And Mayor Hoffman?
Yes.
Thank you. The remaining consent calendar items passed 5-0.
Thank you. C, Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. This is the recap of Planning Commission actions. And what I would like to do is pull and schedule for appeal business item number 4. This is for a site plan 2017-16. Thank you.
There, first and second, any discussion? Nope.
I'm sorry.
You have a first and a second.
Motion and a second?
Second, yes. 4A.
4A, okay. I was waiting for that because it said 4, but didn't say which one. Thank you very much for that. Okay, roll call. Councilmember Newton?
Yes.
Councilmember Bash?
Yes.
Councilmember Hanna? Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer?
Yes.
And Mayor Hoffman?
Yes.
Thank you, 5-0. Passed. Hold. There.
Okay. Kevin, you had E?
Yeah, E, I just wanted to say I'm 100% behind this. I think it's a fantastic project. It's a tragedy, but I'm very proud of the fact that Norco is going to do this. So fantastic, and 100%. And a motion, if somebody else has something to say, a motion to approve.
Since
Second.
he brought it up in Berwyn, Brian brought it here, so the rest of the people understand what we're doing here in a brief summary.
I'll do my best. That's difficult sometimes.
I know,
but I
I'll cut
will.
you off if you don't.
What is proposed here tonight is a healing garden. This particular garden is sponsored by the Incredible Edible Community Garden Foundation. The foundation provides the planting of a tree grove in various communities and does community garden projects throughout the Inland Empire. In this particular case, this is one of 14 healing gardens that would be placed in the Inland Empire. This one would be to honor Benita Bednabendal, who was one of the 14 individuals who was tragically killed along with 22 wounded people in the senseless violent act, terrorism, in the county of San Bernardino at the Inland Regional Center in December of 2015. Benita and her husband, Arlen, at the time lived in Rialto, but always had hopes to move to Norco because of its large lots, animal keeping, and a place to raise their daughter and 2 sons. Arlen, who's in the audience, lived up to that, and tragically, Benita never got to enjoy Norco, but he moved here to continue to live the dream that she always wanted. This healing garden would be placed at Pikes Peak Park. Matt, can you pull up the slide for me? And it would be in the very far south, north end of the park. The healing garden, or the grove here, would be shaped as a heart. And the planting of the grove would have various trees. This is a jacaranda. This would represent Benita. The other trees outlining the heart are eastern redbuds, and they are indicated within that particular track. The other trees in here, and I'll start with the inner heart circle, would have thornless bougainvillea in here, and a trellis, as well as a bench for people to sit and enjoy the view here. This is an elevated view. The slope comes down this way and moves into this particular area. The other trees that I'd like to make note of would be the Chinese pistache. And the Chinese pistache would be these 2 trees right here. We would also put in a Chinese flame tree that would be represented right here, and these 2 particular trees here. And then a crepe myrtle, which would be represented here. And this represents the daughter, the 2 sons, the mother and father of Benita. And then we have a saw leaf zelkova, which is right here. And that particular tree would represent Arlen. So this healing grove is really to, and the ones that will be built throughout the Inland Empire, are really to have people to come and reflect and to also enjoy nature. In the audience with me tonight, along with Arlen, is Mary Petit, who is the founder of the Incredible Edible Garden Community Garden Program. And she also is an arborist, so she can answer any technical questions you may have. But this particular grove would be something that is sponsored by their foundation. It would be maintained for 3 years. It's paid for full by the foundation. And also the foundation has agreed to donate trees for our extended landscape project for the Veterans Memorial as well, and has agreed to work with us on some other tree grant programs, and these people are experts at this. So I think have created a real good partnership with them for the future and for trees within the community in the future. And I'll wrap it up right there.
Thank you, Brian. Does council have any questions of?
I apologize. I can't even talk about it. So I'm glad you jumped in. Even if we didn't have a Norco connection, I'm very proud of the fact that it's very American. So thank you.
We had a first and a second.
We have a motion and a
Okay.
second. Roll call. Councilmember Newton?
Yes.
Councilmember Bash?
Yes.
Councilmember Hannah? Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer?
Yes.
And Mayor Hoffman?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
Moving on to F. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. This is in regard to the compensation for our economic development consultant, and I would like to say first that Roger's been a great help to me, especially this last year. But my concerns are with our overall budget that we are increasing the compensation rate by 10%, effective March to our new budget in July, and then 3% after that. What I'd like to see is us stay the 10% now, and then in July, look at a 3% increase. I realize that Roger's done a lot of extra work, but at the same time, I think if there's additional hours, as noted in the report, those should be pre-approved by the city manager. And that's my comment on that.
Kevin, anything?
So I've been around a while, since '97, and I know when we have a strong economic development director and when we don't have a strong economic development director. And one of the things I try to think of when I think of an employee, whether they work for me or for the city, is what would their resume look like when they left the city? And as I go up and down the street and I see Hobby Lobby and Tractor Supply, and I see a once decimated auto mall, Silver Lakes, you know, one of the things I kept trying to tell people as they attacked Silver Lakes was businesses were looking at that. And one of the problems we have now is because people didn't jump until they wanted to see cleats on the ground or hooves on the ground, was they didn't want to jump. And now property is so expensive. We have major projects in the city of Norco that I frankly directly blame the people that unfairly attacked at that project. And in the middle of this, you had an economic development director that had to fight and slug through all of that to bring hotels and all kinds of things into the city of Norco. I've also gone out a couple of times, 3 times now, to ICSC conferences and stuff. He's extremely organized. I think that in terms, it sounds like a lot, but the truth of the matter is it really isn't that much money. It's not a bank breaker. I totally get that we're trying to toe the line, but I also think we need to fairly compensate our employees. If he were to leave here, the list of things that, even though sometimes he had a piece of it, sometimes he just negotiated it, but the reality is a lot of economic development has occurred since Roger Grody came here. So I personally think that the compensation is very fair, and I would vote to support this. Again, I totally appreciate what Greg is saying, but I think that I get around to other cities, and for a city our size, some of the things we're doing, we're about ready to hear about our bonds. I mean, we have all kinds of things in the city of Norco that people just don't seem to understand, and it's because we have a very dedicated staff that does so much work where you don't even see it. And so I think that, Andy, how much is it in terms of what we're talking about with this 10% toward the end of the year? What's the additional cost?
I think it's in the staff report. I don't have the numbers.
$2,000. So for $2,000 and then 3%. And one of the things to understand is there's no unfunded liability attached to this employee. He doesn't get health care and he doesn't get a pension. And so I personally will support this. And again, I understand where Greg's coming from, but I think that I personally think, and I work very closely with Roger, that he's worth every single penny that we pay him. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Berwin, anything? Robin?
I just have a couple things, and I think part of this discussion will be framed in some of the items coming up for discussion that we have later with the mid-year report and adjustments that are being made. I guess being in the middle of the year and making adjustments to contracts is a little bit difficult for me to swallow when it doesn't line up with our fiscal year. And I agree with Kevin 100% on the work that's been done to make improvements to our town. I just wonder how long you can hold on to past accomplishments without pushing the envelope a little bit, or the drive, I guess, to continue and build on those successes. And so that's kind of where one of my hang-ups is at. I think 10% is a big jump at one time. I don't have any problem with a 3%, but I think mid-year having a 10% jump is big, and I know we only have a couple months left. But that's just kind of where I'm at this time.
Okay. Andy, on the total amount of impact for us for this remainder of the budget is $2,000. Is that correct? With the current fiscal year till July 1st. And so that's a 10% over how many months?
3 months.
3 months. So we're talking...
March 1, 3, actually 4 months.
4 months, okay. So
$500 a month.
$500 a month increase. One of the things, and we always talk about, and Kevin said it more eloquently, is past accomplishments. Besides the economic development consulting fee, Mr. Grody also heads up the Historical Preservation Committee or Commission and does other duties on the side. And I'm kind of like, I'm torn between Robin also is we're doing this at mid-year, and where do we draw the line, and how do we justify this? And then I look at all the things else that we have coming up. I'm in Mr. Grody's office a couple of times a week, pushing him hard, and I know his staff, so I'm kind of torn between the cost and that 10% sounds like a lot, but when you figure it's $500 more a month for 4 months, and then it's 3% on a 2-year contract after that, it seems like we're just playing catch up. It's not something I really want to do, but I don't want him to walk away either. So we'll leave it up to someone to make a motion of what we're going to do.
Can I make one comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
And it's not personal at Roger at all, because like I said, he's been a great help. I get that. But when you play with the numbers, it's not really 10%. It's 10% today to July, and then 3% is on that bump. So call it 13%, whatever. So it's the increase to July and then another 3% on top of that increased amount. And some of my concerns is, believe me, I like spending money, but when we're looking at $1.2 million shortfall today, where are we going to be in July with our either a deficit or if we're going to be neutral? So that's my concern. It has nothing to do with the quality of the work. It's strictly the dollars. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
With the understanding that Roger's work has been actually outstanding, I meet with him on a weekly basis to review his projects. So the issue is budget impact, and is also for me an issue of equity. And on that note, I point out that the compensation that is being recommended for the economic development consultant is still way below the amount that is paid to comparable consultants. And when you include the fact that he doesn't receive any health care benefits, he doesn't receive any pensions, what this amount translates is fairly close to what we pay to mid-management staff in the organization. From that perspective, I believe the amount that is being recommended for him to receive as an adjustment to his compensation is very fair and is very reasonable, and does recognize that we do have budget constraints. If we didn't have budget constraints, you'll probably be talking about paying him about $125 an hour, which is a reasonable rate for this type of job.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Have a first and a second?
Thank you. Roll call. Councilmember Newton?
No.
Councilmember Bash?
Yes.
Councilmember Hanna?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer? No. And Mayor Hoffman?
Yes.
Motion passed 3-2.
Okay. All right, we're going to public comments. It's the time when persons in the audience wishing to address the City Council regarding matters not on the agenda may speak. Please complete a speaker card in the back of the room and present it to the City Clerk so you may be recognized. And you have 3 minutes, please.
Okay, our first speaker is Harvey Sullivan.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council, and staff. It's a pleasure to come here tonight to get to talk with you, talk to you. I don't think you can talk with me, so.
Good evening, Harvey.
I'm here before you to ask to agendize an item that's been going on for several months here in the city. A man by the name of Ron Mugar had a code complaint filed against him, and he was working with the city code officer to get it cleaned up, and the city code officer was coming by once a week or once every few days and checking with him, and he told him, as long as you keep making progress, we'll be fine. And all of a sudden, he gets a letter that had been turned over to a lawyer to go into court and ask for a receivership. I found out about it about 3 or 4 days before it was supposed to go to court for the receivership, and I advised him to get an attorney, that if he went into receivership, after the receiver got done with him, he'd be homeless. He'd be out on the street. And so he got a lawyer, and we went to court, and the judge stayed the receiver, didn't allow it to go into receivership, and gave him 10 days to clean the place up. In 10 days, the property was cleaned and signed off by the city. The code enforcement guy was there. Eddie, the building inspector, was there. The fire department was there. There were several departments there from the city of Norco. The city's attorney was there. Mr. Mugar's attorney was there. I was there. Mr. Mugar was there. Lots of people there, and the place was cleaned up to satisfactorily that they took the signs off of the property and deemed it clean. There was one outstanding issue which had been written up mistakenly, we believe, was a laundry room. And so it had been stayed from the action that it didn't have to be done by the 15th of August. And on that same week at the Winter Court, he and I came into the City Hall to look at the records, and we found permits in here where that laundry room had a permit on it, and it had an electrical permit on it, and it had the dimensions and the architectural drawings and all of that. You just couldn't tell very good if it had been signed off completely as approved at the end of the job. However, the lady that was doing the work in 1969 did pull 2 more permits after that, and they were signed off. So we're assuming that if she'd had an open permit on the laundry room, they would have never issued her the other permit. So we feel like that was kind of a mistakenly added item. Well, while they were there, they found 11 by 26 tack room that they also said it was on.
Can you wrap it up, Harvey, please?
Yeah.
Can you wrap it up?
Yeah, I didn't hear the.
Oh, yeah.
Got me going?
Go ahead, Harvey.
Okay, yeah, I'm right. So they didn't get they added a 11 by 26 tack room, and we've given you papers that shows that that would have been on the tax assessor's roll for 45 years, and we believe that this should have all been cleared up on August the 15th. So he would like to petition the council later on tonight when you're at the end of the session to one of you to agendize it and have it agendized so that he can come before the council and have a fair and open hearing about this process. We understand it was in closed session a couple of weeks ago, and we've heard nothing out of that. So we'd like to wrap this up because the clock's been ticking ever since August 15th, and it should have stopped that day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harvey. No, we can't comment on anything like that. We can't comment on it.
I know you can't comment, but I did give all of you a package, and I hope you all got your package with all the information.
All right, thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Ron Mugard.
Good evening, Mr. Mugard.
Good evening. I'm here to explain a little something that happened that I felt was not really a fair situation. We went in, I've been working with Javier since Ken Swank introduced me to him, and he started taking over for Ken. And he'd come by quite frequently, and we had invited him back to take a look at what we're doing, and he just said, "Oh, everything looks pretty good, and it looks like you're making progress." And he never did come back. We invited him many times, and then I got a letter in November of 17. Stating that the city wanted to come in and take a look at what's going on. And since I was talking to Javier, I really didn't pay much attention to the letter because I had personal communication with him. And then I got a notice that they were going to come in with an inspection warrant and bring a receiver in, and they spent a lot of money on attorney's fees to get that done, and it was really not necessary, and we proved it wasn't necessary by the work we did in wrapping the thing up. So I just wanted you to know that we did a real good job without the receiver that was that the city spent a lot of money on in attorney's fees to have there. We did it without the receiver, and that was proof that it wasn't needed. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. That's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Mugard.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Bonnie Slager.
Good evening, Bonnie.
Good evening. The NHA Trail Elves have been out working again and had some help from some people from Grace Fellowship Church and also some of the neighbors in the area. They're continuing to work on California and have gotten now as far, they started at North Street and now they've gotten as far as Norr. So They've weeded and repaired trail fencing, and so if you haven't been over there to see their work, please do so. And my other item tonight is our Norco Horsemen's Casino Night is coming up March 10th. And I hope you'll all plan to attend. I do have tickets. If anybody in the audience would like tickets, they're $20 ahead of time and $25 that night. And also, if you would like to sponsor it all, I happen to have sponsorship applications as well. So I hope to see everybody in the audience and all you folks there on March 10th. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
One more speaker, Jim Pollard.
Good evening, Jim.
Evening, Council, Mayor, Council members. After attending the Street and Trails Committee this month, I'm very disillusioned at the trail system and the way it's deteriorating here in Norco. And I think that Council and the city needs to come up with a better plan and of raising money to replace trail fencing and maintaining trails that we've lost over the years. I know I live on Santa Anita and between Cordon and Kip's Corner. That trail it goes down and there's no way to replace it. We don't have the funds or the material to replace it. We've struggled through this city trying, just like Bonnie said, on California Street, trying to take care of that. But for safety reasons, I think we need to come up with some plan, whether it's with Parks and Recreation or buttonholing some money to put into these trail replacement fences. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I noticed Chad was out writing notes, so I'm sure he'll check on it. Thank you.
That's all the speakers.
Thank you. All right. Close public hearing. And close public comments and go into public hearing. And first item, 5A, the authorize the issuance of special tax refunding bonds to refund the City of Norco Community Facilities District number 971 Norco Hills, the 2005 special tax refunding bonds for debt service savings. Gina?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to bring up Dr. Anna Sarabian, our financial advisor to the city from Fieldman Rollap and Associates.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Council. Anna Sarabian with Fieldman Rollap and Associates, serving as the city's municipal advisor. We have before you tonight a resolution authorizing the potential refunding of CFD 97-1. That district was formed back in 1997, so it's a very mature district. It consists of 217 residential units, which are subject to the special tax. The district first issued bonds back in 2000. Those bonds were refunded in 2005, and because 12 years have passed since 2005, those bonds the 2005 bonds are now callable on any interest payment date at par, meaning at 100% without any penalty. Those bonds are currently outstanding in the par amount of approximately $4.92 million, and they pay principal every October 1st and interest semi-annually on April 1st and October 1st of each year, and they mature in 2030, so October 1st of 2030. What we have for your consideration is refunding the bonds at the upcoming April 1st interest payment date, which is the first call date that you have. And the proposal before you is to refund the bonds through direct placement with a bank. This is slightly different than the refunding we did last year for the other CFD, where you sought refunding bonds in the public market. The difference now is you're going to sell the refunding bonds directly to one institution, Opus Bank in this case, and the good thing about the proposal is we compared a public sale to a private placement, and given that the term only goes out to 2030 and the volatility in the market, that we've experienced this year, Opus Bank's proposal was actually more beneficial and resulted in higher savings to the property owners in the district. The other benefit to that proposal was that the rate that the bank offered, we were able to have the bank guarantee that that rate is going to remain fixed and locked in until the council considers, and if you approve, until we close the refunding. And so that rate that was proposed was at 3.16% for the refunding. And just to give you some sense of the market, between January 26th and last Friday, rates moved approximately 20 basis points, or 0.20% up. So if you were to sell the bonds in the open market, likely you would experience higher interest cost for the refunding. With this proposal from Opus Bank, the rate is guaranteed at 3.16%. Based on calculations, we are estimating the savings to be on gross basis of 1.08 million. That's about 7% on a net present value term. And those are the net present value savings are about $367,000 and change dollars. That's net all of the costs of the refunding. The public sale required you last year to also prepare an offering memorandum and do a rating, get a rating on the bonds. With the private placement, you don't need to do that, so you're saving a little bit of issuance costs from that perspective as well. And just like with the other CFD, because the tax roll was set for this year, 17-18, the savings, should you approve this refunding, will start from 18-19, so from next year. And we're estimating the savings to be on average, because I know we really care about the per parcel savings, right? How much will the owners benefit? So on average, $413 per year per parcel are the savings. And depending on the size of the parcel, we have had our special tax consultant prepare estimates. The smallest parcels benefit on average about between $355 per year per parcel and $349. That's the low end for the smaller parcels. And the larger parcels benefit about $462 on average per parcel. So very meaningful savings. We are going to keep the final term the same, October 1st of 2030. The existing debt service is relatively level. So we are doing a proportional debt service for the refunding bond, so it will also be relatively level. And so on average, we think that will result in about $413 per parcel per year. The documents in front of you tonight are the resolution approving the refunding, and if you approve that resolution, that will approve an indenture of trust, which is the document that spells out the covenants that you make in paying the debt service and maintaining the bonds. And then there is an escrow agreement, which is the agreement that spells out the provisions of the refunding itself with the escrow agent. There is no, as I mentioned, no official statement and no rating, so the bank will purchase the refunding bonds directly. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Just one thing, I'm sorry, I forgot, is there is a new requirement from January 1st of this year. It's called Senate Bill 450, and it requires any public agency that approves the issuance of debt with a term greater than 13 months to disclose in a public meeting 4 items related to the contemplated financing. Those are included in your staff report in the package, but those are the true interest cost that is estimated on the refunding, the costs of issuance or the cost to third-party consultants related to the refunding, the proceeds from the refunding, and then over the term of the bonds till maturity, what costs are projected to be paid every year. And so that information is there. It's again a good faith estimate based on the knowledge that we have at this date. And should you approve this refunding, we're scheduled to close on March 13th. And again, the rate will remain locked until that date. Thank you.
Thank you. Any council have any questions? Greg?
Just more of a comment that to you and Gina, on these refunding bonds and previous refunding bonds that you've done for us, your timing is impeccable. I would love to have a piece of your portfolio because, I mean, you've been just nailing it all along. But anytime that we can save our residents money is a good thing. Do you feel on that $414 per year per parcel that is pretty consistent, fairly level for the remainder of the bond?
Yes, the existing debt service is pretty level. It right now it's about anywhere between this year, if you did not refund the bonds, it's about $521,000 on the existing debt service, and in the last year, it's $519,000 and change. So it varies by a couple thousand every year. The refunding debt service will be around anywhere between $425,000 to $428,000. So roughly $90,000 of savings per year, which translates into the $414 per parcel. Yeah.
Great job.
Thank you.
I want her crystal ball. I mean, this is the third time you've come in and actually saved us a lot of money, so thank you.
Robin?
No, I want to say good job. I went in and talked to Gina this morning, and she gave me the lowdown on all that, but you ladies have done great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that because I looked at that and I go, $414 over the life of the loan doesn't make sense, but it's per year that they're saving.
Per parcel.
Per parcel, the residents up there are going to love you a whole lot. Gina, you and your staff, and you did a very good job. Thank you. This shows good diligence on your part. With that, a motion to approve?
Excuse me, it's a public hearing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have any cards on that?
Thank you.
No, I don't, but just had to go to the
Thank you.
motion.
The staff, thank you. The staff, bring it back to council. Does council have any other questions? I'll entertain a motion. Pick your choice.
My choice. Okay, we have motion and second. Excuse me, roll call. Councilmember Newton? Councilmember Bash? Councilmember Hanna?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer?
Yes.
And Mayor Hoffman?
Yes.
Thank you, motion passed 5-0.
Okay, we're going to move on to continued public hearing. This is the continued public hearing number 5 for potential district boundaries relating to transition from at-large to district-based council member elections and the first reading of an ordinance. I'm going to turn this over to the city attorney so he can do a brief synopsis of where we've been.
Yeah, very, very brief comments before the continued public hearing. For those of you who were here last 2 weeks ago, this was continued to see if there's any additional input and give people an opportunity to look at the 2 maps which had been presented, but not formally and for the length of time which is required by statute. Tonight, after the conclusion of the public hearing, the council will have the opportunity to make a decision, essentially anything from one end of the spectrum, from adopting a map and adopting the ordinance and implementing district voting beginning in 2018 to not taking any action at all and closing the books, and every option in between, and there are quite a few.
Dr. Levitt, you can explain the other 2 new maps, if you can, please?
Yes, and we just have a couple of slides we have here tonight to present to you to introduce these new maps. We just want to remind everyone what went into the preparation of all of these draft maps, and in particular the federal requirements. All of the maps that we have drawn throughout the process meet the basic federal requirements of having equal population in each district. And that means each district has more or less the same number of total residents. While it doesn't have to be perfectly equal for city council districts, it has to stay under a 10% difference between the largest and smallest. In addition, they all comply, we believe, with the Federal Voting Rights Act. I'll emphasize that it's not possible to draw a majority Latino district or a majority African American or Asian American district in Norco. However, we've kept one district in each of these maps in the south part of Norco at above 30% Latino by eligible voters. In addition, what these maps really differ is on the traditional criteria, particularly the communities of interest. These try to unite and link up different parts of the city in different ways, hopefully to minimize the impact of district elections on the city council. We've looked at growth since 2010. I really appreciate the drive we took a couple of weeks ago throughout the city that went into the preparation of the new maps. And I hope you'll see that that's influenced some of the designs and decisions in the new draft maps, which are also available online and will continue to be available online. So to look at the two new maps, you'll see that we'll call them Yellow 2 and Yellow 3, and broadly speaking, they're very similar. Both of them use Norco Drive, 6th Street, Corydon. It's one continuous road to distinguish their districts 1 and 3. Both of them have 4 districts that go up to Hamner. While districts 3 and 5 have more of Hamner, that's a product of the fact that it's one long census block along Hamner, especially on that eastern side of it where the prison, Lake Norconian, and Hamner are all in one census block right now. We managed to put all of the landscape management districts into 4, unite the hillside, with all of the different landscape management areas on that end of the city. We split the riverbank into 2, so that 2 districts, 1 and 2, each have a large area of the waterfront or the riverfront. What we've used is we've used Corydon so that the peninsula and the bluffs are kept in District 1, and the JR spread and some of the other neighborhoods south of Corydon are in Area 3. And really there's 3 districts with a substantial population on the west side of the 15 freeway as well. The difference between Yellow 2 and Yellow 3 really comes down to that northeastern corner of the city. In Yellow 2, we use California Street. In Yellow 3, we use Crestview Drive. And we do a little bit of trade-off on the south. In Yellow 2, District 2 comes below 4th Street all the way down to 3rd Street. In Yellow 3, it ends at 4th Street. And so each of these are population balanced, but they make that little change. And otherwise, there's very similar plans with identical districts 1, 3, and 5. In addition, we continue to have the original green map and purple map for your consideration here tonight. Each of these looks at creating different kinds of districts. Purple, for example, keeps all of the river in one district, while the green map what the green map looks like is basically an early draft of the yellow one, but divides the landscape management districts and some of the other neighborhoods. We also have the 3 additional maps that we looked at the last meeting. We put them all on one slide, in part because I think the message we got from both council and the public was that these 3 were not the preferred maps by any means, but we still remain available to look at and discuss tonight. And so I'm basically here to again listen, to answer your questions, and to help guide you through this stage of the process. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Because this is a continuation of the open hearing, questions from council members about the 2 new maps? Greg, Kevin, Berwin, Robin, okay. All right. With that, I'm going to reopen the public hearing on this matter. And speakers?
Okay, yes, we start with Jeff Cahan.
Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I've been up here a couple of times, so Just to repeat my opposition to districts, you know that's pretty clear. But if we have to pick a color, I appreciate that my feedback, I'm hoping it was because of me, but the 2 new maps do include, no, maybe not, just lucky, I guess. But I appreciate that my neighborhood, Remington Estates, was put back into the Bluff Blue District, so I appreciate that. So I'm looking at Yellow 2 and Yellow 3. And as far as my district's concerned, they're basically going to be the same. So I also presume, maybe not, but the fact that you asked for 2 more maps was maybe because you weren't quite happy with the original 5. And as the demographer just said, 3 of those maps were pretty much, I think, you know, not even going to be considered or whatever. The only thing I would throw out for both Yellow 2 or Yellow 3, because I know there's that northeastern not discrepancy, but you know, you're moving that line back and forth. If you look at the green map real quick, the one thing that I liked about the green map, and I'll still push for it a little bit, but I know you're going to probably lean toward Yellow 2 or Yellow 3, is it puts the Silver Lakes that's west of the freeway into one district, and it puts the proposed section for the expansion that's going to be on the east side of the freeway in a second district. We've gone out of our way to try to have as many districts touch the Hamner corridor. We've gone out of our way to have as many districts try to touch the 6th Street corridor. I would think it would be beneficial, with Silver Lakes being one of our major properties and one of our major revenue sources, why not have Silver Lakes be in 2 districts, assuming that the proposed extension is approved and is successful. So simply look at the top of the green map where the Silver Lakes on the west side is part of District 1 and the east side of the freeway is in District 2. If you look at Yellow 2 or 3, I'm not sure about where all your census tract boundaries are, but the large portion of Silver Lakes, obviously there's no residents because that's just the park area. The only neighborhood that's really going to be affected is that little strip of Old Hamner, which I think has maybe 12 to 20 houses. I don't think that's going to skew the population a whole lot, but I'm just throwing out that maybe you amend that little bit of a boundary so that way Silver Lakes is pushed into 2 districts instead of just 1, just like we did with the other important corridors in town. That's about it. So I don't envy your position on this, but I appreciate that you've considered it for a long time, and I'm sure you'll make the right decision for the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Next speaker, Antonio Barreto.
Good evening, Tony.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As a voter in the city of Norco, anything to me that would take away someone's ability to vote would be wrong. And with the districting, it seems in the future this is going to be a problem for Norco. And I see it as if you fight now, you think it's going to be a problem with the cost. But if the end result is the same, I would prefer to say to fight it, to keep what we have, to where each citizen gets a right to vote for who they want to. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Next speaker, Linda Dixon.
Good evening, Linda.
Good evening. I've been up here every time, so you already know that I'm adamantly opposed to districting. However, and I don't envy your position, I would like to go ahead and see the money spent to fight this. I know there's many ways and many things that are in the works, some of which I have an idea, some of which I don't. I think the maps are still not right. I'm still not happy with them. If I had to pick one, it would probably be the Yellow 2 map, but I do think that the people west of the freeway are in dire trouble based on these maps. And I also really resent the fact that as an American, if this districting goes through, I will not be able to cast a vote this November. That has to be taken into consideration. And the fact that we're dealing with a 2010 census, I think that we need to figure out a way to prolong this in some way, shape, or form, because we're so close to the 2020 census, and see what that holds. But to react quickly, and I know that this letter from this deviant has given us a certain amount of time to deal with this, but instead of reacting and dancing to his drummer, I'd like to create our own song.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. Next speaker, Sue Bacon.
Good evening, Sue.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I've been up here every time, so you know I'm adamantly against all of this. I think what bothers me the most is I feel that the decision has already been made, and I resent that. I've been to these hearings, and the majority of our citizens don't want this. And we are falling to a threat from a bully. A threat. It's just a threat. And you have your neighbors, you have the citizens here that have sat there and said, fight. We came to this town for large properties. We came to this town to be different. And all we keep on folding to is bullies. Bullies on Facebook. Bullies from staff, commissioners, council that want one way or say it's all about dollars. Well, this is about our lifestyle. This is about what we want and where we want to live, and we have the right to vote for it. I want to have the right to vote for any one of you, or not to. This is too small of a town to be divided up. And it's too big of a town to fall to bullying. It's enough. We either stand up now and do what needs to be done and listen to the citizens. That's why you're up there. We voted you in because we felt you were hearing what we wanted for this town. I hate to think that the decision has already been made. I hate to think that Horsetown, USA is falling to bullies.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. Next speaker, Wendy Stevens Rodriguez.
Good evening, Wendy.
Council, I have written this to each of you, but what if what I'm thinking causes someone else to think of a solution in the pieces of this puzzle? A Norco think tank. Essentially, the cities being sued are just being handed a $30,000 bill. The San Diego Tribune quoted the deputy mayor saying, I feel like we're already being found guilty of something and we don't even have a chance to prove our innocence. It doesn't matter what city it was, it's what they said. What Shankman is doing is wrong. Each of the maps have our street on them, so any would work if we need to switch to districts to keep Norco financially safe. But what if only one candidate runs per district? What is the sense of an election, and where's our right to choose and vote? From what I have read and hear, Shankman is very cocky. I liked what Linda Dixon said, referring to David and Goliath and the Norconian as a historical site. I have compared the district challenge to the Norconian. Is it possible? Can we? Could we do this? I know this is not a TV or a movie, but maybe we could think outside the box. In the movie The Magnificent Seven, gunfighters defeat the bandits in a Mexican pueblo. In A Few Good Men, Tom Cruise gets tough and uses the law, knows his opponents to make Jessup confess. In Blue Bloods, they do the right thing. using legal resources and get the bad guy. Who would have thought that turning our cars into billboards would help defeat Measure L? I do not know how much money we have. Is there an attorney out there who sees all this malarkey and wants to do the right thing, who is tough and smart enough? I do not have the information. Maybe someone does. I am willing to do without some things, such as newly paved streets, unless fighting just does not work. Could we? What does the California State Bar have to say about this guy? Good luck. You've got my support.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Next speaker, Jody Weber.
Good evening, Jody.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. Well, you got one public comment. I've asked around, nobody's really familiar with her, but that comment seems to suggest that we have not had any members of council with diverse backgrounds. It also suggests that we've not had members of council with diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. It also seems to suggest, if I'm interpreting it correctly, that all we have is council members that have high income or retired. Last time I looked, Councilmember Grummeyer, I don't think you fit into either of those categories unless there's something I don't know. But over the last several public hearings, I've expressed my dissatisfaction with this. Again, it's my personal opinion against districting, given the fact that it will not achieve the purposes of the California Voting Rights Act. It doesn't do so particularly based on the population of this city. It will not achieve the purpose. You cannot create a majority-minority district, and even in your attempts to create 30% districts, you have to again also look at the CVAP and then take a look at what Latino voting rights participation that you have out of that percentage, which is down around 12 to 14% in the largest district that you have. And so with those numbers, you can't even create an influence district. So you're not achieving what the CVRA is expected to achieve for larger populations. You're not going to get that here. But the last point is, as I have said on each occasion, what amount of money is this city willing to spend to defend your way of life here? I haven't lived here as long as many of you, but I've lived here long enough to have pride where I live and to represent the city of Norco on a larger state scale and actually bring some of those individuals here so that they understand the way of life that we cherish here. Keep in mind that although Shankman touts the City of Palmdale case as influential in his influence in trying to get you to do districting and over the threat of litigation, I certainly understand the cost that is involved. That cost is, and Mr. Harper can advise you, it's a little bit more expensive there because they were at a appellate level. We're certainly talking about millions, but you also can't make the decision over a threat, because even if you do decide not to vote on these districts, which I'm encouraging you to do, given the majority of people that have been before you are against it, you have to keep in mind that that doesn't necessarily mean that you will be sued. We've gone through the dog and pony show, and yet it hasn't achieved any results evidencing the fact that you can create a district or create districting that will achieve the purpose of so-called correcting polarized voting. You're still going to have polarized voting potentially in district elections, and you could take a look at that at the proposition level. So again, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jody.
Thank you. Next speaker, Corinne Holder.
Corinne? Yeah.
Sorry.
Hi, Corinne.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I just want to again thank you for your time on this. I did notice on the staff report that there was an estimated cost of what we think might happen if we were to try and fight this. And I know a lot of people have asked for those numbers, so I appreciate that that was brought out. And I would still, you've heard my arguments, I would still encourage you to fight this. I do appreciate the last couple of maps. The two new yellow maps seem to really really have taken into account some of the issues that people have had, and they do a little bit better job of maybe representing the specific communities that we can kind of carve out if we had to really try at it. We are all concerned that we lose our vote. You know, that's one of our biggest things. We will not be allowed to vote for every single council person in this very small town. We like to know that we have your ear, that we can talk to you, we can go and talk to our council members, and that maybe they will actually listen to us. This is not a big city. We know where you all live, so it really, I mean, like, and that's not a threat. It's just.
You've got the lieutenant worried right now.
In a little tiny district, yes, you might have one person run. Maybe we'll get 3. Your representation for each of these districts might be sorely lacking in enthusiasm and what they really want to do. The other thing that just keeps bugging me every time I read these numbers, again, the 2 new maps have a little better job of evenly distributing the voting population across the board. We had some high percentage deviation early on, so that did a little bit better job. But when you look at the Hispanic voting population, we're not creating a district that's going to have a better say. If you look at the percentages, the numbers are lower than the average, or, you know, the number of Hispanics in the city as a whole. If they wanted to have a candidate, if anyone in Norco wants to have a candidate, you get behind them and you try to get them voted in. And anyone that's Hispanic could do the same thing. In a district, some of these numbers are 12%. How is that? That is increasing the voter dilution and making it even harder for one person. If they were a minority and really wanted to get in, that's going to make it harder for them to get in unless they just have, I mean, I have Hispanic neighbors, we all do, we're all friends. If they're a good person and they want good things for Norco, the odds are they'll get voted in. It's not that hard. You guys all got here and I don't know, did we work that hard? But it really doesn't create what it's designed to do because we're too small. So I recommend you fight it. If you're going to pick, I like the yellow maps 2 and 3 better than the previous ones, but thank you.
Thank you, Corinne.
Thank you. Next speaker, Harvey Sullivan.
Good evening again, Harvey.
Same to you. I don't really know much to say about this tonight. I talked the first time on it, but I'm totally against districting. However, I think you got your backs up against the wall. I'm not sure, and I don't believe for 1 minute that you've got your minds made up on how you're going to vote, because it's got to be as confusion to you as it is to us out here about what's going on. So I'm sure you've spent a lot of time laboring over it and trying to figure out which one would be the best and this and that. So I encourage you to do the right thing, whatever it is. We've already, if you look at the cost there in the staff report, it said the attorney fees could exceed $500,000. So one of my questions to you is, haven't we already spent about $125,000 to $150,000 on this process already with the amount of money to go to that, plus the staff time and all the maps are drawn up and everything? Aren't we already into this about $125,000? Okay, so if we could throw another $500,000 or $1 million to it and it could still lose, is that right?
It's possible.
So, well, I'm going to leave it up to you guys. Whatever you, I'll support you either way you go. So, have fun doing it. That's why you get paid the big dollars. You know.
Thank you, Harvey.
I'll support you either way. Okay.
Thank you.
And we have one more speaker card, Rosa Zuniga Green.
Good evening, Rosa.
Good evening.
Pull that mic down towards you. There you go.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Hoffman, members of the council, and staff.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. The first thing I noticed, and I'd like to know, is I had submitted a map that circled all of Norco. I want Norco to be just one district. That's it. It doesn't have to be divided up. And the question I have is, how many maps were received that reflected that?
There's a lot.
Okay, why isn't that being presented?
I'll let the demographer tell you that, but
Okay, that will be fine. I'm in complete opposition to districting. I've lived here close to 14 years. I remember years ago that my husband had just driven into Norco to get gas at 6th Street by where Jack in the Box is at, and he said, I ran across this neat little town. They don't have any sidewalks. And I said, oh, okay. And here we are in Norco. And I became involved in the community, and I have to tell you that I absolutely love everyone here in the community. We need to stay united. I'm concerned that the districting is going to break us apart. What happens if there isn't anyone that runs for council in a particular district? I understand that the process then is appointments. How are you going to choose those people to appoint to those districts that aren't going to run for council? If no one wants to come, or you go out and look at applicants, I know you all do a great job, and I know you spend a lot of time, working very hard for our town, and I, am glad I'm not in your position, but I would like you to consider that you need to fight this, because if you wait and then to see what's going to happen, you have not been formally served. You don't have to respond in 30 days if you're served with a suit. So is it going to be spend the money now or spend the money later? And you're ultimately going to end up, one way or the other with the same response? I don't know what the answer will be. I just know that I'm not going to get an opportunity to vote for 4 years. My husband's not going to get an opportunity to vote for 4 years because of the district that we fall in. So please do whatever you can.
Thank you, Rose.
This. Thank you. I would like to see that map.
No more cards.
No more cards. Dr. Levitt, if I can, and bring you back up here, and just quickly go over the numbers of maps and the information your office received.
Sure. And we actually received our last batch of information from the city as of last Friday. So there may have been some things that have come in since then. At that time, we had heard from 135 unique individuals, including 17 of those maps that had the entire city circled, plus an additional 5 or so maps that did things like draw lines right down through the city, or, evenly spaced districts throughout the city. Now, as part of this process, we do have a map online of the whole city demographics, and that's been up there from the beginning. But we do want to acknowledge that, I think I have only seen one comment that has mentioned a specific plan by name or number, and that was right after it said. But I think we should still continue to be at large. So, that's, the comment has certainly been overwhelming in that regard.
Okay. Does any council members have questions of Dr. Levitt? Thank you. Oh, I'll close the public hearing now. Thank you. Thank you. All right, bringing it back to council. John, I'm going to throw this out at you so you can explain the timetable we're on.
Oh, okay. The timetable in general, if you recall, there was a period of 90 days within which there was a cap of $30,000 if you took action to adopt districts. That 90 days is run by a few weeks. I expect that if you adopted something tonight, that there wouldn't be a lawsuit, and I also expect that there would likely not even be a bill from Mr. Shankman, or if there is, he had a tough time defending any argument that he spent $30,000 on this. In terms of when something has to be done in order to make the 2018 election, that's approximately June the 1st.
Yeah, thank you.
Unless you want me to make comments in general. So.
No, I'm going to take it back to council. Thank you. Kevin, I'll start with you, since you're looking at me.
First off, money spent. Andy, how much has been spent thus far?
We don't really have
the demographer.
The demographer, the initial proposal was for a cost not to exceed $25,000. Keep in mind, he has been here more times than we anticipated. With every appearance that he makes at the city council, that's additional $2,000 for the demographer. So they have been late sending bills. At this point, staff has not actually received any bills yet, but I anticipate that the cost incurred already is in excess of $25,000.
So we're under $50,000. I mean, easily.
Yes.
I guess I'll just jump in here. So. So I'm not happy with the process either, and but I understand that it doesn't really matter what our history is. We had one black person run, and this all started with the Black Coalition calling Mr. Shankman, and he went, hey, we're having trouble getting elected. Well, we had one black person run, and he was elected. As I said before, we have a black city manager. We've hired all kinds of, we've had black, Hispanic, Chinese, Korean that have worked for us. I can only find, and going back historically, I can find one person that maybe was a Hispanic that ran and didn't get elected, but he quit. So I'm not real sure how that works. My problem, one, with the map is I'm not real happy, for example, with the Hills being one unit, and the reason is you get one vote. So I have a problem with that. I am tempted, in looking at two, I'm tempted to say I'd rather go up to Crestview, but at the same time, once again, California would then only have one vote. So I'm not really happy with some of that stuff. One of the things that we've talked about is I'd like to do the voting polarization, and maybe, Doctor, maybe you could explain in a second just exactly what that study means, because the problem we have here, and I'm not the first, this isn't my statement, it's that we're trying to find a solution where there's no problem. We actually, if we break up our districts, we're actually going to hurt Hispanics, the protected class, having the opportunity to run. My understanding is that it's, and this is very complex, other cities don't have that problem. They've got 51%, 40%, 30% Hispanics, and maybe that would work. But per the law, we have to find a way that the protected class has the opportunity to get, frankly, a leg up to get elected. I think that by splitting up our city, we're going to hurt that. And interestingly enough, I've been reading, that's exactly what's happening, is that Hispanics are not getting elected and the other protected classes. I'm very bothered with the idea of voting for 4 years. That really bothers me. And what that means is that people who are, for their district doesn't come up in 2018, they don't vote till 2020, so it's really only 3 years, 3.5 years, something like that. It's still wrong. It's unconstitutional in my opinion, but I'm not a lawyer, he is. The end result. You've never admitted you're not a lawyer. Well, I didn't say I wasn't smarter than a lawyer. I mean, one of the things that maybe if we pick a map tonight, and that means we don't have to pay $2,000 for him to keep coming back, except to maybe do a voter polarization. We pick a map, and I don't think we have the solution, but if we pick a map, we can say we picked a map, but I think we need to continue trying to figure out a way to solve the problem that the state is asking us to do, which is to find a way for the protected class to have a leg up, an advantage to get elected. And these maps certainly don't do that, any of them. So for me, and again, this is not my original idea. I think we need to do a study on the voter polarization. I'd like to hear from the doctor talk a little bit about that. I think we need to go ahead and pick a map, so if somebody comes to us and says, hey, you need to do this, well, we got a map, but it doesn't work, so we have to figure out a way to make a map that works. And I think we just need to continue looking to find a legitimate solution to protect the protected class so they have the ability to have a leg up. I hope that all made sense, but I would like to have the doctor explain what that means to do us, because we haven't done the study. And my understanding is if Mr. Shankman decides he's going to sue us, the first thing he's going to do is he's going to want to see voter polarization. So if we have it sitting there going, well, here it is. So if you could explain that in detail or simply so somebody like me can understand it.
And I will actually just say, he won't come in asking for it. He'll have done it and bill you for it, probably at several $100s an hour. So basically what the California Voting Rights Act says is it takes the federal law, which requires that jurisdictions show not only racially polarized voting, but also a history and legacy of discrimination, also that you have candidates that have run, and it throws everything out except a basic racially polarized voting analysis. And what is a racially polarized voting analysis? Well, I was drawing it here in my seat, and I know it's going to be a little hard to see, but what you have is on one axis, on the basically percent Latino by precinct or block or some unit of the city, and the percentage of vote for a particular candidate. And if there's a line, if there's a diagonal line, a correlation, basically that percent Latino predicts the vote for a particular candidate, that's evidence that there may be racially polarized voting. If it's a flat line, if it just goes straight across, and I just drew that in right here, this would be evidence that there is no racially polarized voting. That regardless of where you are in the city, that precinct, every precinct more or less casts votes in the same way. Now, I have to say, we have not done a racially polarized voting analysis of Norco, so I cannot tell you today whether or not there is racially polarized voting in Norco. Frankly, that's something that would be part of litigation one way or another. But, this analysis, what it would do is we would look at the election results probably for city council races, maybe for, a school district race or a race of a jurisdiction that overlaps with the city. Assembly district or Senate district or congressional district. But we start generally we do city council first, because that's where the plaintiffs are going to go first. And actually, in this case, the burden of the proof is on them to show that there is racially polarized voting. So when you get that suit, they're going to have to be able to pick an election or show from an election or two, hopefully more than that, because they're going to want to show a pattern. So we would analyze those results for you and probably go over them as part of potential litigation in a closed session and advise you on that.
So like the school district, Jose Lalas, Mary Ibarra, those would be things that would be taken into consideration.
And I have to mention that the race of the candidate doesn't actually matter. All that matters is that people of different ethnic groups or racial groups voted at different rates for different candidates. And I've seen, there's been a case where it was Latinos voting for a different white candidate than whites were voting for, and that was enough evidence in that case to be considered racially polarized voting. So I want to make that very clear. Now,
Can you explain that again? So in other words, if a group of Caucasians vote for a black candidate, that's polarized voting?
If it looks like white voters are voting for a black candidate, but the black voters in that district are not, or voting more or less the same or for a different candidate.
The white candidate.
Yeah. Then that could be evidence of racially polarized voting, particularly if whites vote at high enough rates, or in that case, vote in high enough rates that the black preferred candidate, the candidate who's preferred among African Americans, does not win.
It's interesting.
And that's, and so I know it's crazy, but that would be part of the analysis we would do, is look at the different candidates who ran and look at how they did based on just the race and be able to give you that information.
So I would like to maybe have that done. And the other thing I want to make sure I make a point of, I talked to Justin today, and Justin, I admire your courage for coming here. Thank you. We are not in litigation, and it would be my hope that Sabrina Cervantes would please weigh in on this in some form or fashion. We need some help. And in the words of the late, great Bugs Bunny, this is screwy. So that's all I have to say.
Dr. Levitt, before I go to Councilman Newton, what's the time period it would take to do a racially polarized study here in Norco?
Well, it would probably, it'd probably take about 30 days. Maybe we could push it to 3 weeks, but we definitely want to make sure that we got good results. Obviously the data was the best quality we could get, and to make sure that what we have is the best available information to give you to make this decision.
Okay, so about 30 days then. All right, thank you.
So basically, this is what they're going to use against us. I like the idea that we would be proactive to fight it ourselves, to say, we're going to make every effort to make sure we comply with the California state law in terms of the protected class, because they're going to hit us with this anyway. And what are they're going to use the same numbers, correct? I guess they can rig them. I don't know what they'll do, but
well, they would have to. Like what the letter would say would point to specific elections that they would have to show that these different voting patterns.
But maybe if we do it ourselves, it would show a good faith effort that we are really trying to comply.
If we don't find these patterns, then that's evidence that the city could use. Like, okay, you found one election, but we've got 3 or 4 elections where we don't see this pattern.
I was kind of thinking about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg?
I wanted to thank you. I think when you first started here, we may have treated you like the enemy, but you're not. Okay? So I just wanted to have that understanding with you. I don't have any questions for you at this time, but I do have some comments, if that's all right.
Go ahead, sit down. Thank you.
As far as the maps, I'm kind of leaning towards yellow number 3, and kind of the decision I made between 2 and 3 was that between California Avenue and Crestview is representation for the residents on California. And then reading some of the comments and letters that we've received, some of those residents felt they didn't want to be divided. So it kind of changed my opinion to go back to yellow number 3, which moves that boundary between 2 and 4 up to Crestview. So that's kind of my recommendation as far as a map that I would be in favor of. And then just a few other comments that what Kevin had just mentioned with the doctor as far as, pursuing this next step is decide on a map, but move forward with the study. And there's a couple of sayings, but you and I have read the same book, and it's basically that battles are won before the battle is fought. And so I do support that as far as moving forward with that study. I'm not in support of the ordinance that's before us tonight. A couple other notes, just I wanted to thank all the residents, all the folks that sent in letters and emails and everything else, and it just shows what an engaged community we have. But this got me thinking that, there's certain, in our history, there's certain moments in time that we faced, and one of them was back in 2010 when we had our own fire department, and Berwin, Kevin, and myself we got the threats, and we heard the threats, but we were also up against an organization that took it as far as going to our senior citizens, going to their apartments, putting notices on their doors, telling them they're going to die. And we were able to get through that. And I always thought that was one of our biggest moments that we had in our history. It was historic. This is the same thing. This is another moment in time, but the fear base is financial. And I think that's the game he's playing on us and all these other cities is, I'm going to take your money. I beat Palmdale, so that's the whole angle, is just financial. Screw them. I guess that's where I'll leave it because I don't believe into playing into fear. Thanks.
All right. Robin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, some similar viewpoints as my colleagues up here, but I looked at it a little bit different. The first one, in the staff report, it says there's that we got the letter from Shankman and Hughes on October 2nd, 2017, alleging that voting within the city is racially polarized, resulting in minority vote dilution. So we have a couple things there, alleging that we've done something wrong or that there's racially polarized voting. So we've heard in discussion already, we don't have proof of that. And then going back to comments from many of you tonight, there's the threat. So we have those two things. And I think doing the study ahead of time to look at the numbers to see if there is racially polarized voting is a good idea. The second thing, we've talked about fighting back and we've talked about threats. For me, it's looking at what are we trying to protect. And people have mentioned a lifestyle, and lifestyle is a really broad term. To bring it, I guess, to me, back to the community level, we're looking at having a community where you can raise your kids and feel like they're safe and they can have some independence in growing up, but they're sheltered and protected. We're looking at a community that values the equestrian lifestyle, being able to have their horses in their backyard and ride your horses on a trail and go to different places. We're looking to protect a community that is patriotic and spiritual. We heard that today. We're looking to protect a community from a force outside. And so while I get Norconians love a fight, and I totally agree, and I get that, and I think most of us have that spirit, just in the name of looking at the positive, what are we looking to protect? And I think we're all on the same page there. Now, sitting up here, we have to look at the balance of financial responsibility and the lifestyle, and if we spend money, are we going to be able to maintain the lifestyle? And we have agenda items in front of us where we're looking and asking for more money and adjustments and running at a deficit, which makes my stomach hurt most of the time. So that is difficult for me. So then the last part, and again, I'm just giving you all of my thought processes going through this, just so everybody can understand. A lot of people have mentioned David and Goliath in discussions throughout the last few times that we've had public hearings, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll go back and reread the story and look at some commentaries. So I did that. And some interesting things popped up for me in reading that story and looking at the commentaries. The first one is Goliath had been taunting people for a long time. Wow, doesn't that sound familiar? And so I thought, interesting. The other thing in the commentaries that they talked about was the fact that Goliath had weaknesses that most people didn't see or know about because they were scared. And so Goliath was defeated because he had weaknesses. He was a giant, he was bigger, but he wasn't as agile. He wasn't able to move as quickly. They think that his vision was poor because of his race, and so he couldn't see. And so all of those things got me to thinking that if we really look at this as a David and Goliath story, which I think most of us do, it's time for us to gather our information, figure out the weaknesses, and be very diligent and plan about how we go through this. And I think if most of us were to go back and read the story and the commentaries, we'd see a lot of parallels. And we would see some guidance, for me, some guidance on how we should proceed going through this particular fight. Sorry, protecting our lifestyle. So, obviously, we would do a better job protecting what we have if we stay united. And being divided into districts is not necessarily something that I believe is good for our city or appropriate for our city or the residents of our city. And I think taking some time to do more studying, to really get to know what the weaknesses of our potential opponent are, and to be very strategic in how we proceed would be the best. With that being the case, there could be a potential of saying we like a map tonight, but that doesn't mean we're going to adopt an ordinance necessarily. So please understand that there is some strategy involved in this, and we hear you and we're listening. But the financial responsibility is important to us and has been discussed, and that protecting our lifestyle and all those things that I talked about is of the utmost importance to every one of us sitting up here.
Thank you, Robin. Berwin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank all the audience, residents that's been coming and supporting us on this extortion, I should say, whatever it is. But a lot of you have been here every time. A lot of you have made good comments. And we did look at your map, Rosa. I loved your map. I love all the maps with the circle around the whole city. It does us good. But as far as threats, I don't like threats. I don't back down from threats. Never have. If Greg talked about when we changed fire departments, we had all kinds of threats. We didn't necessarily get threats from the firemen. They were having the citizens to do their talking because they didn't have enough guts to come to our face and tell us. And I don't remember, Greg, were you and Kevin on council when we changed we took the fire away from the old group and give it to the new one? That was a horrible meeting that night when that bunch of losers came in and stood up and threatened us. And if you remember, I told them, don't threaten me because I won't back down from you. It'll just make me madder and I'll do more against you. And I've said since the start of this district thing, this guy bragged in that article that he's never been beat. Well, I was in the running horse business my whole life, and there's never a horse that never was outrun. One time or another, they stumble, they get beat. And I think when a person gets cocky, they're just leaving themselves open for defeat. And I think that we've had some good comments here tonight and good ideas. And I like yellow map number 3. I think it's more fair to the city than anything. But like Robin said, if we can adopt a map, but that don't mean we have to adopt that ordinance, because we can take more time and get the report on the racial profiling and everything, and see what we can come up with, other ideas. And because I've talked to other cities for 3 years that they've started this district in, and everybody has caved in. And talked to the guy from Marietta the other day, the council person. They voted in district because they got 2 seats open this year, but he said they were waiting on their options to see what happens with the Poway. So I think we've got plenty of options, and I hope that we can come with something tonight to satisfy everybody, because trust me, we're not caving. You know, we're trying to defend our citizens and our rights, because all of us up here love the same lifestyle that you folks love. That's why we all moved out here, and I've lived out here for 32 years. And it's been one fight after another. I'd lived here for a year, and I see former Mayor Cusabano back there. We've been on the same team. We probably met about 31 years ago or so, and got involved with fighting these causes, and we've always prevailed, and I think that everybody sticks together, we can prevail on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Berwin. 7 maps we've gone through. And actually, in these 7 maps, the one thing I did learn is that no matter what we do, we cannot actually go and help one particular race or not, or protected population, because they're spread out all over town. And kind of like Greg and Berwin, is I like yellow map 3 because it's what it does. But at the same time, I agree with Kevin and Robin and the rest council. And this is from my law enforcement background, is we don't go into court without the proper evidence. And that's what you need. We may adopt a map tonight. Doesn't mean we have to adopt the resolution. And it would behoove us to get the evidence, because if it goes to court, we need to show that this city is not racially polarized. If it is, then I'd be the first one to say, okay, we got to go to the resolution. But I think when it comes down to it, the experts are going to find that it isn't. Because no matter what we do, and Jody knows this, and John knows this is going to end up in some kind of litigation in court if we continue to fight it. He asks us, how much money can we spend? We've already spent a bunch. But at least let us spend money on what we want to spend it on. Making sure that we have the right evidence to go in there. And that's why it would, that's why I asked how long it would take. About 30 days. And I asked about a timeline, is because no matter what you think, we're stuck with a deadline. We have elections coming up in November 2018. And what we have to do is make a decision, knowing that if we do a resolution, we have to get this to the register of voters by June 6th. That means the resolution has to be adopted in May sometime and have a second reading. So we have to have this done by May. Ready to go. It doesn't give us a lot of time. But then again, when I look at this we're always worried about, and Sue said it right, he's a bully. But we have to do our due diligence. And most of the courtrooms that I was in, it was the judges look for due diligence. Yes, there are those that don't. But you do your due diligence. And we're not shoving this over under the table, and we're not going to ignore it. We're doing our due diligence to see what if we are a racially polarized community. And like Dr. Levitt's little graph will show, I bet you it'll show or not. So, and things are saying about votes. We have some important decisions coming up here, and what I see on districting, and that's why I'm not in favor of it, it's going to disenfranchise 2/5 or 3/5 of our community in our districts. We have some serious issues that are coming up in the near future that we need all the city to vote for. I would hope that just because you don't have a council person running in your district doesn't mean you're not going to get up and vote for serious issues, and that's not what we want to see. But unfortunately, that causes, districting will cause some of that disenfranchisement among voters. But I don't want to give Mr. Shankman an extra dollars in his pocket either. So I'm going to throw out, and at this point, if no one else has anything to say, entertain a motion that perhaps if we want to adopt them, we'll do this in several steps so we can, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, is some of our options here. So if you can, throw those out. What as a council we have at this point, what are we going to do?
Oh, I mean, the options are kind of those things which are in the middle of what we talked about, either adopting approving a map and adopting an ordinance tonight, which will result in districting in 2018. Obviously, that is the least likely to be litigated, and the other end of the spectrum is to essentially do nothing. That's and kind of flowing down from the litigation. You can not adopt a map, but continue to look at other maps, ask the demographer to schedule another public hearing and consider other map alternatives. I haven't heard from anything tonight or in the past or from the council that additional maps are going to really address the problem. It seems like probably the most reasonable alternative is either to adopt a map tonight but not approve the ordinance and proceed in the way that you've discussed, or alternatively, don't adopt a map, don't do anything, and proceed through looking at the racial profiling analysis and look at other alternatives. Another city that is a couple weeks ahead of us in that regard is the city of Mission Viejo, who didn't adopt a map, but has said instead that they're going to move forward and looking at other alternatives other than districting as a potential solution to they don't have a racial profiling problem either, but to at least addressing the racial profiling issue. The statute doesn't say that the only alternative is districting. The statute says if you have a racial profiling problem, that it has to be addressed through districting or other reasonable alternatives. And so Mission Viejo is looking at other reasonable alternatives, and your choice tonight might be based, since it doesn't appear that there are any other maps which can be presented which are going to be any more satisfactory, as has been suggested, adopting a map, choosing a map, but without adopting the ordinance which imposes district voting, and to direct that the demographer perform a racial profiling study, and at the same time staff looks at other potential voting alternatives like cumulative voting.
So without, and I'm going to, because you mentioned those alternative voting procedures, can you list, you sort of said cumulative voting, what are some of the other options that would be viable out there?
Yeah, there aren't really too many. All of them would require either a judge to impose them or to amend the charter. But cumulative voting, meaning that you get to vote for more than one, that there are other ways of weighting voting so that it's not district-oriented, but it's functionally has district. There are a number of studies. There are other states that have done things like this. California generally no. But the constitutional standard is still one man, one person, one vote. for Jody's benefit.
Could I jump in? Could I jump in maybe? The goal is that we have been challenged to prove that we have a lifestyle that embraces and has a history of embracing whatever color and religion you are. I believe everybody in this room believes that. So I think we should take this one step at a time. Approve the map, whichever one that is, but then the next thing we need to do is find out if in fact we have polarized voting. And then at that point, the next step would be, let's look, if in fact we have polarized voting, I know these people very well. Guess what? We will probably go to districts or find some way that we make sure that every person in the city of Norco has a fair shot at voting who they want to vote for, however we do that, whatever your color or race is. But the first step is we need to find out, and Robin said it the best, is we need to start basically putting arrows in our quiver. We need to begin to go, okay, what exactly do we have? Is our belief true? So I would make a motion that we first pick a map, and secondly, we don't approve the resolution. We then direct the doctor here to go forward and do, because this company does it. Do we have to, by the way, Dandy, do we have to put that out to bid?
No.
Or we could just take it to him, and let's see if in fact we do have polarized voting. You know, one of the things we haven't discussed tonight is this all changes in 2022. So guess what? It could all change. These districts may not mean anything. So my motion would be, first we adopt a map. Secondly, we then direct the doctor to.
Specific map?
Yeah, we pick a specific map. For me, I would pick yellow 3. Even though I don't really like any of them and they don't really do the job, but I would pick yellow 3. So I make a motion, we adopt yellow 3, and then we don't adopt the resolution. We move forward to get the evidence, we find out exactly what our voter polarization analysis is. That would be my sloppy.
Under discussion.
Go ahead, Greg.
John, when you say adopt a map, typically when you adopt a resolution, you have first, second reading.
You're selecting your preferred map.
So can we have another word in lieu of adopt?
Select.
Select, sure.
Okay.
I amend my motion.
Yeah. The purpose is so that if bottom line is we come down at some point in the future where you want to adopt an ordinance, you have a map that's already selected that plugs into the ordinance.
Anything else, Greg?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. I know we were first saying, and I understand, Kevin, what you're saying is you want to get the evidence first, but because of the time element that's involved, if it depends on what goes on, I don't think it would hurt us if concurrently we did have a committee that Andy has available to do that kind of research for alternatives. At the same, concurrently with that, if at the same time, it's because it's going to take them some time to do that, and it's a matter of time for me.
Okay, well then I'll amend my motion. So we pick 7. We direct the good doctor to do his thing with the voter analysis, and we also direct Andy to take his committee, and they begin to look at alternatives. And can we get yours back in a month and Andy's back in a month, so we know that we're not dragging this out? 3 weeks, a month? How much time?
Realistically, you're probably looking at 45 days.
All right, so 45 days. So in 45 days, can you have the information back? No, we're not dragging this out. We are legitimately trying to figure out a way to find out the answers.
What we can do is work with city staff to find the appropriate council meeting to bring this out, giving you enough time to make a decision before the 2018 election deadline.
So there's three things. Select a map per Greg, direct him to do the study, and have Andy and his group look at alternatives to ways that we can make sure should the demographer come back and say we have an issue, then we need to find the best solution to make sure that everybody in the city of Norco has the opportunity to vote for the candidate they want, like that.
All right, and with that, Andy, he has the direction to select the people he needs for that.
Yeah, I'm good. His group, whoever that is. So you have to amend your second, Berwin.
Okay, and are we denying the ordinance at the same time, or should we do that separately?
No, you're not doing anything with the ordinance, you're just not adopting it.
Not doing anything with that. Okay, so it's just the select yellow 3 map, correct? Direct to do the study, and direct the city manager to do subcommittee or committee to do research on alternatives, correct? Very good. Oh, and review to come back in 45 days. Okay, that's fine.
No, review to come back at an appropriate meeting.
Oh, at the discretion, so take the 45 days out. I'll just take it out. There we go. Done. Okay.
You got a first and a second, you got it all?
I do have.
Thank you, all right.
Every single one of them. Councilmember Newton?
Yes.
All righty. Councilmember Bash?
Yes.
Councilmember Hanna?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer? Yes. And Mayor Hoffman?
Yes.
Thank you. 5-0 to adopt all of that.
Thank you. With that, it's 20 after 9. We'll take a short 10-minute recess and come back. We're back in order now, back in session. Moving right along, we are now at, let me get my calendar, at 7A, mid-year amendments to the fiscal year 2017-18 annual budget. Gina, is that yours?
Yes, it is. Good evening. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm pleased to bring you our mid-year report for fiscal year 17-18. And as you are aware, we are 6 months into the fiscal year, but we've snuck in a little bit of January and February in this report as well, and requested from staff updates on revenues and potential expenditures for your approval. I'll make this presentation as brief as possible, but also giving you some detail. Yes. To get to the main point, the recommended mid-year budget revision is associated with our adopted revenues. As you recall, we began the year with a deficit, and we still have a deficit, but it's improving. And our adopted revenues, we are projecting an $826,000 increase. And we'll be going through the detail on that. In terms of expenditures, we are recommending a decrease of a net amount of $23,241 due to reductions in anticipated sheriff expenditures and increases in facilities-related improvements, software purchases, economic development programs, and plan check services. The gas tax fund, every year we come back with the final revisions from the state of California, and once again, they're proposing to decrease our gas tax revenues by $14,127. And there is sufficient fund balance in the gas tax fund to cover this unanticipated reduction in current revenue. In terms of our park facilities fund, staff is recommending $182,000 in improvements to Nellie Weaver Hall, including new air conditioning units and roof replacement. Funds will be provided through a transfer from the general fund and a concurrent project savings, which I'll get into later in the presentation. In terms of the water and sewer funds, we are recommending a projected increase in our water revenues of $722,000 due to increasing revenue trends associated with approved annual rate increases and consumption levels. Sewer revenue is anticipated to increase by $276,339 due to an increasing revenue trend associated with a contractual adjustment in the California Rehabilitation Center's sewer charges. Excuse me. And here I'll briefly get into the detail of these items that we're projecting regarding revenues. In terms of property tax, we're projecting an increase of $162,310 based on our original projection, and this is mainly due to reviewing our residual tax increment revenue, our basic property tax revenues, as well as an inclusion of about $57,000 in refunding savings as a result of the most recent redevelopment bond refunding. In terms of sales tax, we're projecting a $354,000 increase in revenues based on a prior year carryover and new development associated with Norco Village Center, and also gas revenues. I'll get into more detail on that in the next slide. Regarding other taxes, we have an increase in business license for $11,608. And just to let you know, our TOT is trending perfectly to budget at $568,000, so we don't have an anticipated increase in that revenue at this time. Regarding franchise fees, we're looking at $92,475, and that's an increase in refuse franchise and a decrease in cable TV franchise. We're seeing AT&T revenue decreasing significantly over the last year, and I'm assuming it has to do with probably more of a direct TV influence. Regarding motor vehicle in lieu fees, we're seeing a minor increase by the state of California of $13,246. In regards to intergovernmental revenues, small increase, well actually $6,000 increase. It's a net of $3,348 for our WRCOG Beyond Health grant for party partners. The net is there is a credit we're giving to the city of Eastvale regarding our reimbursement relationship for fire inspection services. Regarding fines and penalties, we're seeing about $6,000 increase, almost $7,000 for code enforcement fines. Interest income and lease, an increase of $32,636 for interest income and lease income. For community development fees, $102,144 increase for plan check and permits, and we'll talk about that more in a coming slide. And community service and recreation revenues, we have a decrease of $18,370 for We People revenues. We're seeing also a decrease in programming or interest in the program. So you'll see a reduction on the expenditure side. We're also seeing an increase in dog licenses as well. So there's a net in there. And regarding other revenues, we have an increase in our administrative bond reimbursement. Staff does have reimbursement associated with the bond refundings, and that's indicated in that revenue adjustment. And I'm sorry, dog licenses is also in other revenues, and that figure, not in the recreation revenues. So that's a net number there with the increases and majority increases, not decreases. And there's a little story about sales tax because this may get confusing over time. The state of California has decided to hold back our year-end revenues for 16-17. If you recall, our original year-end figure for sales tax for last year was $6.7 million, but it actually came in at 6.5. The state of California is holding our monies for longer than our accrual period, which is 90 days. So we received it in 17-18. So you're seeing a bump up in our year-end projection to over $7 million, which includes about $135,000 more in sales tax receipts as well as a result of Norco Village and our gas tax revenues, used car sales. So we're very excited about that, but we're also hearing that the state may continue to hold our monies. And when you're a city that has increasing sales tax revenues, it delays that income. But there's a possibility we may start flattening out as well. So I put a little line there on the prior year to see what we would have been if we had received the money in the correct year. So you would see, of course, an increase in our current year, but we're slowly becoming flat. Norco Village gave us a bump, and we're looking for more of that from them as they open more storefronts there. And this is a visual of what I've just presented on the revenue side. As you can see, sales tax had its own slide, but motor vehicle license is a large chunk of our revenue. And property tax is increasing slightly, and we did see in the last quarter an increase in median sales in the city. And continuing on down, you can see that the one negative there is the party partners revenue, or We People revenue, for a total increase in general fund revenues of $826,770. Now, getting into a little detail for our general fund expenditures. Start off, and staff is available to answer your questions on these. I'll briefly go through them. Non-departmental, city clerk-related program associated with the community outreach program. As you recall, this was adopted in August, and expenditures have incurred, and we're requesting that money as well as additional monies to go through year-end for $25,000. Regarding economic development, we have a proposal for a fair market value analysis of naming rights from a consultant. The next two items are a cleanup for a grant we have with our CTC. They're very strict about how we budget, so we made an adjustment in mid-year to accommodate them. The WR Card Beyond grant is the a grant for party partners that is on the revenue side as well as the expenditure side for part-time services. Building safety, as you saw on the revenue side, an increase in our development-related revenue. As you know, we're going to have a hotel coming through the permit process. That will also impact our expenditure side. We do have a consultant, and we're requesting an additional $55,000 to for existing plan, but also additional plan check through year end. Regarding the sheriff's contract, as you're aware, the sheriff's contract, the implementation of the amendment for traffic enforcement, which included one CSO and one traffic officer, has been delayed. We have worked with the sheriff's office to identify about $136,000 to accommodate the overtime enforcement program that we have. And every year about this time, we get some good news from our insurance provider, PERMA, and we received a premium reimbursement due to our status in workers' comp and liability. And animal control is requesting additional dog licensing, and as you saw on the revenue side, we have increased dog licensing going on in terms of permits there, as well as some locks for kennel security. For public facility improvements, we've corrected an issue we had with the sheriff's station gate repairs. It's been a chronic issue, and this year we replaced the motor. In terms of contractual services for public facilities, there's been quite a few repairs, air conditioning, plumbing, replacement, and also a proposed contract increase in janitorial services. And the staff report went into detail on each that total for $89,161. And then on the expenditure side, a decrease in We People programming because of the lack of revenue that we're receiving in that area. And recreation software expenses. The recreation process, of course, uses an online system for program registration and facility rental. That is an antiquated software program now, and they're phasing out and charging us considerably on a quarterly basis. And this is the amount for a new software system. Regarding building improvements, a net amount of $79,824 to be transferred to our park facilities fund, a public facilities fund for Nellie Weaver Hall air conditioning and roof replacement. The total project is $182,000, and I'll show you the detail on another slide. For a net decrease in expenditures being proposed of $23,241. And this is a visual of the departments, and just to break down a non-departmental traditionally handles the transfers to other funds. It also is including the $25,000 for community outreach, as well as the PERMA reimbursement for a net increase of $56,825 for that department, and an overall decrease of $23,241 in expenditures. The general fund balance. As of July 1st, 2017, an audited reserve amount was $11.4 million. We are looking at $18 million in revenues with a mid-year adjustment of $826,000, appropriations of $20.4 million, and adjustments that actually reduce expenditures of $23,241 for a net estimated fund balance of $10.2 million. And for a graph of this, we have, as you can see over time, the city has, revenues have exceeded expenditures, and we are closing the gap regarding the $2 million deficit we had at the beginning of the year to about $1.1 million with the adjustments we're proposing tonight. And that represents 50% of our total general fund expenditures in terms of our relationship between the fund balance and expenditures, and exceeds our 25% requirement for reserve. And finally, we've got an overall summary. And the general fund summary highlights the fact that where we were at $2 million deficit at the beginning of the year, it's being proposed to be reduced to $1.1 million. And below that is our gas tax revenues. A little detail there, just a small adjustment in the SB1 road maintenance rehabilitation revenue, about $1,720. Got the miscellaneous grants. This is impacting our other fund, the adjustment for RCTC grant match. And getting into a little bit of the detail for the Park Facilities Fund, as you can see, the Wayne Macon Electrical Backbone originally received a transfer from the general fund of $530,000. The bids came in significantly lower at $427,824 for a net decrease savings of $102,176. It's being proposed that savings, as well as a transfer from the general fund, be applied to the Nellie Weaver air conditioning units and roof replacement project. And then finally, the detail associated with the water and sewer fund revenues. And that concludes the mid-year budget report. If you have any questions, staff is available.
Council, have any questions of staff? Greg, I'll start over there.
I have a bunch of questions, but it's also some discussion items. Is that okay to ask questions that way?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with.
All right. So let's just kind of go by the numbers out of the report. Thank you, Gina, for your help the last couple of days on this. Overall tax revenue is good. I mean, we're doing good. There's no doubt. So that is firing on the correct cylinders. My overall concern still is this deficit that we're in. So the one thing I wanted to address is where I'd like to spend some money, and that's in community development fees. That since we've seen that increase, with plans and plan check. The plan check fees will cover some of the costs of that staff, but we're still not, I think, with the customer service, we're not processing things quickly enough. To me, is that we need to have a building official here at City Hall more than one day a week. It's not right when we have residents that come in with questions of a building official, and then they're told, we can't answer those. You have to come back next week on the day that he's here. So I talked to Steve a little bit about it, and I'd like to find a balance, whether it's like 4 hours a day or another full day. But I think it's not right to only have a building official here 1 day a week, and not for the level of the activity we have. So I like what we're doing with the city clerk, our community outreach program. I'm okay with spending that money because, once again, that's reaching out to our residents, and I think the benefits are there. Economic development under the naming rights. I haven't been part of that subcommittee, but to allocate $65,000 at this time concerns me on a phase one, just to find out what's out there. I think we have enough talent in-house that could handle this on the naming rights. And then as we would get further down the road, it's the phase two with the naming rights, that what little I understand about that has the potential of almost doubling that cost. So that's my thought on naming rights for today. I wouldn't want to spend the $65,000. Question on Sheriff's Department, that the money you showed being reduced, was it 300 and some thousand?
Correct.
I believe, coming back?
Yes.
Because the sheriff hasn't been able to fill the 2 positions. Once those positions are filled, that money goes back to the deficit then. It's that 300 some thousand. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, at this point, there isn't a determination that they'll be hired before June 30th. So that savings is now.
So we're going to take that off?
Correct.
Let's just say, for a guess, say they show up May 1st, okay? Which I know they won't, but if they were to show up May 1st, that dollar amount then would stay within this adjustment
We'd
and
have to make an
increase it, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. It'll be year-end adjustment.
Right, okay. But if it was before July, it would be pushing it up.
Yes, yes.
And Eric, you don't see that happening?
It's hard to say, and I'm waiting for a definitive answer in terms of when those positions could be filled. And that's why we're just continuing with the overtime enforcement, and as well as relying on the grant to help us with the traffic enforcement as well, and that seems to be working out well. So at this point, I don't have a clear answer, but I imagine even if they did show up before the fiscal, all that would be needed would be a small amount to fund them for the remainder of that fiscal. And then going into the next fiscal, you would be paying for the whole thing.
All right. Thanks.
I hope that was correct.
I did have a question earlier on Sheriff's Station on public facilities because the report said a gate motor, and what I learned today, it was 2 gate motors. I mean, I chewed up on Brian pretty harsh because it said only 1 gate motor, but there were 2 that got replaced.
It was 2, and I think that their age was somewhere near 15 to 20 years old, and they weren't designed to handle the heavy load of the metal steel gates that we have. So what was happening is we had continual failures, and they would stop operating, so we'd have a non-secure parking lot. So the cost of getting them fixed over and over and over again led to discussion about simply having them replaced.
Yeah, my question was that I just had purchased 2 motors, and that number didn't jive what I had bought on the outside. I think what it really came down to is you just didn't want to get out of your car to open the gate. Okay? We've spoiled you. Public facilities, capital outlay, public improvements. This is on the air conditioners on Nellie Weaver Hall. Granted, I know Murphy's Law, those ACs are going to take a dump this summer. I'll acknowledge that. But Brian, I can't buy this as a savings. We took $550,000 out of our reserves to fund the backbone electrical at Wayne Macon. And that was a life safety issue, and I have no heartburn about that whatsoever. Those bids came in at 420 or whatever, so that, let's say, $130,000 is not a savings. It was, to me, it was, we robbed Peter to pay Paul. That's Peter's money, and it needs to go, that 130 needs to go back in the reserve. So I have some difficulty with taking that 130,000 or roundabout, plus another $79,000 out of our reserves to fund that public facility and do those repairs. And I think what this tells me is the relationship to the budget, but our basic need of that we need to get moving and we need to get serious about a sales tax revenue measure that is going to support infrastructure, streets, trails, and public facilities. Because we're going to be chasing this dog forever if we don't get that corrected. But I don't see today being the time to spend this.
Just for you and the rest of the council, the units are dumped now. They're not operable. And so at this point in time, I cannot provide a climatized building, period. In fact, the heating units are not working. And that building, per code, should not be used without the heating units. They will work and dump on us. Waiting until the summer isn't an option. They're not going to work now. The units are shut.
So where's your fund from the rentals in Nellie Weaver Hall to pay for the upkeep of Nellie Weaver Hall?
Well, we do get rental money that goes into the general fund. That money is collected and put into the general fund. However, the amount of money that is collected or the amount of use over the number of years, we don't set that up to depreciate that to go into building infrastructure.
Why not?
It's a great question. It just never has been done that way. We've always, if we were to do that, and that is a concept that has been discussed years ago at this council, and we actually started a fund for that, and we actually put money into that fund. But currently, right now, the revenues that go into the general fund is to help support all infrastructure within the city, based on it is. And you made a point to say that basically that if we don't look at our infrastructure and come up with a game plan, a revenue measure of whatever that may be, the clock is ticking. You can no longer continue to defer maintenance without not going to cost you a heck of a lot more money. And that's where we are right now.
And I agree 100%. Yeah. But I think, say, Nellie Weaver Hall, I think there should be some type of what you charge for that rental, or a portion of that should be for the overhead to maintain it.
And I think I think that's worth the discussion to look at that overall and maybe on some public facilities that generate a revenue, that a certain portion goes towards actually capital replacement in that type of thing.
We're on the same page, but I'm looking at the overall that.
The other comment is that in relationship to the savings, if you, the money that where the bids came in at Wayne Macon, because of that, we won't spend all of that money. That money would go back to the general fund balance. We would then be making a request for the full $182,000. And either way, if we want those units to work. And the problem we have, it's the outside deck, that patio. It's not the roof. It's the outside deck that basically has to be redone. And to do that, I have to pull those units off, replace that deck, put the units back, and those are 4 12-ton units. And so we will have some energy savings in there. So I couldn't really tell you today what that payback would be over time, but I could get those numbers for you in regards to what we would save in energy usage. Also, we're at about a SEER 7 with that when we're looking at SEER 17 now. So we do have energy savings when replacing those units. But those units are just, we can't, they don't cool anymore. And we're actually putting, when we try to put money into them, we're just throwing money to bad right now with them. And I don't want to put any more money into them because they're not salvageable at all.
You know what the code says.
I do. And
Okay.
so then we should close the building down because there's
we
no
get the money.
heating element for that building.
Right.
And then we're going to be affecting a lot of different groups. And if that's the council's decision, I'll put a letter out tomorrow to those groups and let them know that Nellie Weaver Hall will not be open and all of their events will be canceled, including Horse Week coming up.
Okay, now you're done with your attitude?
No, I'm just trying to
Okay.
express the need for this.
All right. And I understand the need, Brian, but the money's got to come somewhere. It can't keep coming out of reserves.
I agree totally with your idea related to a revenue measure because I think we have to look at that. That has to be part of our future strategy, and I know that that's going to be discussed shortly in budget workshops with the council. I think it's a needed way of us looking at infrastructure. And you're right, it's just not public facilities. It's streets, it's trails, it's roads, it's everything that we have an aging system. And that aging system, if we don't, it's just a matter of we only have so many fingers in the dike where it's going to crack and break.
Right.
And we have to have a game plan for the future. And what that actual revenue measure is, I have no idea at this point in time. But that discussion needs to take place and done soon.
I mean, we're going to see it soon at City Hall here with the air conditioning and the roof on this building.
Yes.
Okay.
We did do, at least we did buy some time with the roof at City Hall, in which a few years ago we did replace the roof. And on that unit, and on that sense, we did get a warranty. So we have a 20-year warranty on that roof. The problem is and there's 26 air conditioning units on City Hall. And out of those, we have replaced about 6 of those. We have about 20 units that are 25 years or older that we're putting money in just to keep them limping along. Yes, they need to be replaced as well.
See, your statement earlier may come back to bite you because now if you want to put out a letter to the residents saying City Hall is going to be closed, there may be support for that.
Yeah.
Okay? That's all I have.
We're limping along right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And one of the things, and I know, Greg, on that, the infrastructure committee that concluded a couple of years back in 2015 pointed out that their infrastructure needs included Nellie Weaver Hall, and some of the things was at $4.5 million annually, and then to do over the next 20 years. And so there was discussion in that, and that's why, and I'm sure the city manager will have that measure sometime around the end of March, 1st of April, when we'll be looking at that revenue sharing or revenue generating proposal.
Yeah, we'll certainly be bringing back an item
Okay.
for consideration of the city council no later than the second meeting in April.
Thank you. All right, Kevin?
So I'm going to take a little bit different tack. Totally get the deficit, but we've been in worse spots than this. And I can remember when they wanted to close a police station. Remember that, Berwyn? Got to close a police station. Got to close a police station. And I can remember many councils postponing fixing the air conditioners. And we'd say, come on. I was part of Park and Rec when we went to council and said, hey, take some of that revenue stream and put it towards repair, which, by the way, Ingalls Park was at that point running at a $500,000 deficit. We've kind of climbed out of that. In the 1930s, I think I've said this before, the companies that survived and were depression-proof doubled down. And one of the things that we did when we couldn't make payroll is we doubled down. And we went out and we fought to bring in a whole different kind of diversified business. So, for example, one of the things, I know it's easy to pick on, but if you look at the naming, and I have a question on that. So Greg brings up a good point. So it's $65,000 up front to develop a committee that will, for example, go to Atlanta and talk to Coca-Cola, or go to some of these different places and have to develop all those connections to bring those naming rights, which also includes creating the context, why they want to come here. And then what happens, though, once they ascertain that that's possible, there's then a second phase in which they will have to spend more money to bring them here, or is the $65,000 all one package?
If I may, sir. They're separate.
Yeah, you got to earn your $2,000 now.
It's not a good night to be asking for money, but this is really an investment. The $65,000, you can view it like an appraisal of real estate. It determines what the market will bear. You may have read United Airlines just signed a $69 million deal with the LA Coliseum. Every facility has some value. Ingalls has some value. It's going to be at a smaller scale, obviously. But we need to know what that amount is. Knowing what that amount is, you can start planning for improvements, staffing in the future. I submit that the $65,000 would be recouped in the very first year of any naming rights package. You're right, the second phase is more expensive. I won't beat around the bush. It's $10,000 a month, the retainer. It could go as long as 12 months. And then they get a 15% commission on whatever the ultimate deal is. But as I say, even that, the second phase, and by the way, we're not obligated to go into the second phase. We could take our report from phase one and part company. We could potentially work in-house to follow some of the leads and the recommendations that were provided in what would be a comprehensive report delivered after phase one. But if it's promising, we might want to entrust it to people that have these relationships nationwide and let them negotiate the best possible deal for us. So if that's the case, we would enter into this retainer, $10,000 a month. Now maybe after month number 3, they've got a deal. So we're not paying a retainer for 12 months.
You're paying 15% of whatever the revenue stream is.
Yes.
And so you'd be looking at things like, you know what? We talked about this when that arena was built. Arena. We've been talking about this forever, trying to find a way that those 2 now gigantic billboards can actually become a revenue stream, and finding ways to cover the costs down the road. I totally get we're at a deficit. Life safety issues, Greg properly pointed out, in terms of Wayne Macon, we had to take care of that. But again, I look back to the 1930s, the entities that survived were those entities that doubled down, particularly in advertising. And so I'm a little nervous about that, but I also understand you did a lot of, you actually put it out to bid, and you took it down a little bit, but you couldn't get anybody cheaper. I can't really talk about this, and if it comes to a vote, I will have to exclude this section, but one of the things that bothers me is the decrease in we people revenues, and since I'm in that business, I have concerns because, as you know, there's a lot of new things that have come about through the school district which are greatly impacting this program. And I have to ask, and I'm not saying we should do it because I love the program. It's a fantastic program. But if it's operating at a deficit, I'm wondering if somehow we need to double down on...
It's not we're operating at a deficit. It's expenditures to revenues match. In fact, actually, if you look at the expenditure side, the expenditures are reduced by almost 24,000. $100,000. So it reduced itself equal or if not more to
So it's money not coming in.
It's money not coming in. Expenditures do not, that program matches its revenues to expenditures, so it does not exceed its cost for what it generates.
Okay, well, so what I was going to suggest is maybe somehow we double down on the advertising for the program, because I think it's a very popular program. It's just that we're down in numbers, correct?
Down in numbers, and there's a trend, and I think it a little bit has to do from what our analysis is that the age group population or our community, younger families, younger children are not as prevalent as they were 5-6 years ago. And so, but I have seen over the years this go up and go down. And as younger families are able to come into Norco or afford to come into Norco, then you start to see that climb back up. We've seen it in our basketball program. We've seen it in some of our other programs where you have that 12 and under type of age group. And in this case, we're looking at pre-kindergarten where we have that age group where we have a drop. However,
well, that's because that's transitional. I don't think that's going to come back because it's transitional kindergarten. That's the problem. The before and after care. I mean, how do you fight free?
Right.
It's tough. I agree with Greg, and I'm really impressed that he said it. I mean, I'm really impressed that he talked about the revenue generation measure. I think that I sat on that committee, and I don't think people realize how in-depth we looked at that. And I think that at some point, we have a problem in Norco in that we are like, what was it that Jeff Allred used to say? We're like the bumblebee with lead wings. We shouldn't fly, but we do. And because of the large lots, trails, and all the things that we're trying to maintain and have successfully really since we became a city, we don't have the kind of revenue streams that other cities have where they're planting 15 houses on an acre. And at some point, we have to really look at, we have our own fire stations, we got 5 of them essentially, we got a police station, we have all these things that bigger cities have. And we now have to find new ways to, 1, fund them, but 2, inure ourselves against Sacramento. Because you know what? Sacramento views cities as a piggy bank. And so I think that we need to continue finding ways to fight through that, even if there's times when we run through a deficit. Also, to the energy savings, I would not be in favor of shutting down Nellie Weaver Hall. I think that it's a very useful asset to the city of Norco. I'm not real happy that we're running this deficit. Stupid me, I thought we were running at about 900,000, and I thought I misread it. So, but I would vote to approve this budget, but I think that we need to really sit down and look at new revenue. And then the other thing too, Robin was saying how we kind of can't rest on our laurels. Right now, we have a major project that's working out on 6th Street. We have a major hotels coming in. We have a major project at the 100 acres. Wiley Labs, something's going to happen. All of these things, there's all these moving parts. We better know what we're doing, but those are things that eventually should generate a lot of revenue. And if we can actually put, Coca-Cola Hal Clark Arena and get $500,000 a year or something from that, or $200,000 a year, that would go a long way to keeping that facility up. So anyway, I'm really impressed with the numbers. That said, I really am listening to Greg over here because I think he makes some very good points. But again, I'm a great believer when times get tough, you double down on what it is you're trying to accomplish. And I think there's a lot of history to support that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Robin?
I guess the one thing, I was on the subcommittee for the naming rights, and I was surprised to see it in this format presented to council, only because there were 2 of us on the committee. I would have hoped it would have come as a discussion item so that my colleagues would understand the program a little better. So I am disappointed in that aspect, so that it's not explained to my colleagues and the residents that are present tonight. I don't think this does it justice, to be quite honest with you. People see a $65,000 price tag for something that is hard to understand and to comprehend. And so even with that being said, if that's something where we can bring that back as a presentation for people and approve it some way. I don't know how the rules work for the mid-year adjustments, but I think that might be a good idea for that one.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Yes, we are prepared to, if there is an appetite for exploring this, we're prepared to bring it back. The city manager and I have discussed bringing it back at the next meeting for a more thorough exploration, and a member of the Premier Partnerships staff would be here as well.
Would that cost us money?
No.
Okay. Just making sure. I know they have to fly in, so.
And also, we can amend the budget at that time.
Oh, okay. All right. I wasn't sure. And then Nellie Weaver Hall, I'm going to tell you, I'm super torn. In there a lot for different events. But the point that Greg brings up, that we're not saving money, we're just shuffling money. That's what we're doing. We're not saving, we're shuffling. But I would like to see on that, what is the income being generated from the use of that facility versus our expenses? And I know a lot of work is done for scheduling, and we're, keeping that place busy, and it's a multi-purpose area. If you just look at the list of events that are held there, it's critical, really, to our community and the events that are held here. So that part of me is like, yeah, we need to spend the money and we need to fix it. But I guess it just needs to be presented in a way that it's a necessity and we're not saving money. We're moving stuff around. But the other part of me is, we're here at mid-year. Is the condition of those air conditioning units any different than it was when we started our budgeting process? So in the 6 months, all of a sudden we've gone to crap? Or?
We have been continuing to put money into those units over the last couple years. We're at a point, though, where even the contractor is telling us, I can put fixes to this, but you're spending a lot of money that is just throwing it away, because there's no guarantees that I'll can continue to keep it working and reliable, because the units are just so shot.
Right, and I get that. I'm guilty of that at work as well, trying to get the last little inch and bit out of my equipment that I can. But if, like, I just had a refrigerator worked on last week, I could have told you 6 months ago that I had an issue with that refrigerator, is what I'm getting at. And so when I'm looking at my budgets, I don't get a mid-year review. I get a one and done, and that's it. And so I think maybe we need to just, during the budgeting process, really take a hard look at how things are going, or our allocations. Because it's a big, $182,000 middle of the year.
Yeah. I could probably, it has gotten so bad that we actually have to take a water hose up there to cool it in the hot summers and run water on those units, on those coils, to keep to get the temperature to come down. I think Councilman Newton brings up a good thing. This was identified in our infrastructure issues, that these are going to need to be replaced, this and many other units. Mm-hmm. And we're continuing to, I think that's what Councilman Newton is alluding to, is that we're continuing to go down that path. At some point, we have to say, when are we going to look at some way of generating some sort of a revenue to help replace those? And so where it becomes more capital versus just operational maintenance, where I go up, I clean the filters, keep them going, and get the life expectancy that I should out of those, where these units are 15 plus years and they're done.
Right.
And I could probably spend and probably Band-Aid them up into the end of the fiscal year, but I'll probably be spending $15,000 to $20,000. I just don't think that's good money to be spent.
Got it.
And if these were smaller units, I'd have a different way of looking at it, but they're such huge units, everything's expensive on them when we have to do it.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Pervin?
No, excuse me, it's all been said. Good report, Gina. Thank you.
Yeah, it's getting late. I agree with Robin. On the budget is what it is midterm, and the economic development thing about the naming rights, I too would like to see that separated from this approval, then bring it back at the next meeting so you can fully understand it. There are things that even if we were to approve, and we had a CIP budget that covered our $4.5 million shortage a year, we still couldn't bring Ingalls Park and some of the other facilities here in town that the company Premier Partnership suggested to look at for naming rights. I mean, this was not only Ingalls Park, this was Wayne Macon Park, this was other facilities in town that generate people, that bring people into town and do that. So you just don't look at it, the Ingalls and the two arenas there. So it needs to be brought out in a full deal. One of the things in the building and safety check, was that mostly for Wildan and the other companies, Steve?
Yeah, our contract with Wildan, they provide plan check services. We send the plan checks to them in their office in San Bernardino, and then they send them back. Part of the contract as well is for 4 hours a week, we get somebody from the office to come down, and he does plan check services in City Hall, and at the same time is available to answer questions at the counter for people that have problems and issues they need to work out that our counter staff is just not qualified to do. So right now we're getting 4 hours of a person a week.
And with the amount of buildings, and I agree with Greg, this is not a way to run a good business. I mean, it's 4 hours is ridiculous. It would be something to look at in the budget for the 18-19 year, that we need to either increase that contract rate, bring it back for us to look at, or I don't want to hire anybody at this point for it, but we do need to do a better job of servicing them. If we're going to have these projects come in, we need to do that. So,
we could, if you will, we could increase the amount of hours per week to a full day, and it would be, put my glasses on, it would basically double what we're paying right now to $3,400 a month to have a person 1 day a week rather than just 4 hours.
well, I don't want to do that right now either. Okay. I just, something we need to look at.
All right.
It's a customer service thing. I'll agree with Greg on the increase. Again, Brian, we need to look at the increase in fees when we do our fee approval and schedule so we can cover some of these maintenance costs. I've been up there at Ingalls. Jimmy Underwood and I built that original patio, and I know what that cover looks like. I know what we did. I know you had to reinforce it. The problem is us fixing and maintaining those AC units has actually caused that deterioration in that roof for putting all that extra water in there. And if you think about a life safety issue, I hate to see one of those 10-ton AC units come crashing down to that roof. That thing is rotten. And so that's one of the things I'm going to leave it at that. And I was going to ask you how much it costs to service those things, and you're saying it's $15,000 and $20,000 a year, or?
No, that based on right now, we have 3 units that are down. So replacing compressors and coils and stuff like that, I'm looking at what that would cost just to do repairs to get them to run, which they won't guarantee that those are going to continue to run.
But your service guy is out there every week or every other week.
Almost every week.
Yeah, and so that's costing us money to have him out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Particularly, right in the summer months when the heat starts getting, we get into the 90s or above, that's where, right now, I don't have that issue, but in the summers is when we have no, I'm not even getting air to come out of it.
I know, that's why there's a ladder with a hose sitting up there so your guys can go push it up there. And my question to you, the software class, is that what it's called?
Yes, it's it does registration, programming, and also facility reservations.
I'm curious, why is this in the midterm and not been done at the full year? I mean, why all of a sudden they just dumped us out of a program?
That the provider, we got an extension, but the provider, we went out with an RFP through the process, and the provider is no longer willing to service that system anymore. So I can purchase an extension for basic repairs back, but then again, I'm looking at my software. I roll the dice if I don't do that there will be no service to that. This service, that particular software is no longer viable anymore. So either we're going to invest in new software. By the way, we pay into every registration, and every participant pays a maintenance fee which goes to the general fund for replacement of this.
Okay. Just bothers me we have to do it mid-year. All right, any cards? No cards? Okay. Close.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make some comments. Quickly, if you could go back to the chart that shows general fund reserves. And then I'll address some of the issues that have been raised. No, the one before. Yeah, that one. Okay, so what we show here, and I do like to put this in perspective, is that going back to FY 2012, general fund reserve, if I remember correctly, was under $2 million. This was as we came out of the Great Recession. Since then, you can see that general fund, we have increased those reserves to a record of $11.4 million at the close of last fiscal year, 2016-2017. Unfortunately, that trend is reversing. There are several reasons for that. But when we adopted the budget last June, that budget showed a nearly $2 million deficit. That was what we projected in that budget. As we look at this mid-year budget report, although there are some good news, but underneath that, there are actually significant bad news, and that is that even though, so on the revenue side, we are picking up additional revenue of $826,000, which is what is leading us to reduce the $2 million deficit we started to about $1.2 million currently. Those revenue numbers, there are significant one-time items that are driving these revenue numbers. And number one is the property tax. Between that and the sales tax, which is actually monies that should have been booked last year, but was carried over to this current fiscal year. And community development fees, even though those fees are rising, that depends on the level of activities that are taking place. So as soon as some of these big projects go away, those revenues are not going to be there. We are picking up $66,000 in one-time reimbursement of administrative costs. And then the big thing here is the Sheriff's Department budget, which is where a lot of the savings is coming from. The budget for the CSO as well as the fully dedicated traffic officer is about $450,000. We are reducing that budget by $314,000. So that item is still, is again, for purposes of what we are doing here tonight, is a pickup of one-time revenue, one-time savings, because that position is not being filled. So if you look at the totality of this, the situation we started at the beginning of the year hasn't changed that much if you take away all these one-time items. And that clearly shows that we are entering into a period of structural deficit, okay? where our ongoing revenues are not going to be sufficient to cover our ongoing expenditures. We recognize that part of that is being driven by again, our inability to address our infrastructure needs. Some of these health and safety issues that we talk about, whether it's replacing air conditioners or doing the work we had to do at Windmaking Park. So that is a big picture issue we need to address. I know we have this fund balance in the general fund. It certainly is not sustainable, and based on if you again drill deep into the numbers, even our operating revenues, if you take away the one-time items, and when we actually fill the CSO position, as well as the dedicated traffic officer position, we are in a period of structural deficit where operating revenues are not going to be sufficient to pay for operating expenditures. So I do want to have that at least at the back of everybody's mind as we look forward to this report that will be coming back to the City Council in about a couple of months or less in terms of what we are going to do. There are limited opportunities for us here. I know we strive to do economic development as much as we can. The situation we are in at this time is not something that is going to be addressed by economic development alone. We will continue to work on economic development. There are limited opportunities. The city is being built out. So the big tax generators opportunities are not going to be there, regardless of what we do. That's just the equation we have at this particular point. And so we need to have a long-term fix for this problem that we are currently facing. Then going back to some of the items that were raised specifically during the discussion here, building official, the hours being increased. Clearly, I did have some discussions with Steve on this, and I too shared the need for us to have increased hours, and adding it as part of this media budget is probably a reasonable thing to do. It's not a whole lot of money to add there to make sure that the customer service is adequate. On the naming rights issue, we debated about whether we bring this item first to get appropriation for it, and then bring back to the City Council a full report that describes the program. In hindsight, I guess we probably could have brought the report and request for the appropriation at the same time. What we were trying to do here is, since we are doing this media budget update, that we request for that allocation, and then if that is approved, we bring back the program. But I do clearly understand that it would have been better that we brought the two items at one time, both the request for appropriation as well as a comprehensive description of the program. There were some comments made regarding the We People program. This is a program that I have had discussions with Brian with respect to us having a critical look at this program to see if we should be really in that business. And the reason I say that is, if you look at the history over the last several years, what we've done is actually not able to meet the revenue targets. Granted that is also followed by us not spending the monies that are allocated to fund our program. So the question is, given the demographics in the city and the changing family situation, is this a program that we should continue to be in? So we're looking to have a review of that. With respect to, I think there's some confusion here in terms of what we are doing with Nellie Weaver Hall air condition replacement and the project that is being done at Windmaking Park. Clearly, this is semantics. I don't see it as shuffling money. The two projects are completely distinct. So what we have is an appropriation that the City Council provided to do a project at Waymaking Park for $500,000. That bid came in lower than what that project was initially planned for. So the difference between what the City Council appropriated for that budget and what it came in at represents a savings from that would have gone back into the fund balance if we didn't have the item that we're dealing with respect to Nelly Weaver. So now we have the Nelly Weaver. That's a $182,000 project of its own. So those two are clearly distinct projects, and they should be viewed as two separate projects. One where we did not spend the entire amount that was allocated, and another one where we are asking for $180,000 to do air condition replacement and other improvements to Nelly Weaver. A lot of concern have been raised as far as why are these items coming during the media budget process. I do like to remind everybody, media budget process is in fact part of prudent financial management, in that a lot of information becomes available. If you look at the budget that we're working at right now, the numbers that are in that budget were compiled like March of last year or April of last year. So it's nearly a year, and that those numbers were compiled, and those numbers were compiled based on information that was available at that particular time. As time goes on, fast forward, we're nearly 10 months from the time those numbers were compiled. Certainly a lot more information have become available, and the operational needs have come about, and as a result of that, is not inappropriate to request for adjustments to the media, both on the revenue side as well as on the expenditure side. The other item is why is the money collected from Nelly Weaver Hall not being set aside to address Nelly Weaver Hall expenditure needs? The way we do the budget now is that those revenues all flow to the general fund, and they are not dedicated to a specific purpose. On the same hand, the expenditures that fund Nelly Weaver Hall are also appropriated out of the general fund. But there is one thing to keep in mind is if we can change the way we do budget by dedicating certain portions of revenues to specific projects. It doesn't necessarily solve our issues because we have to, for example, look at Ingalls in totality. And the reality of it is Ingalls, all of that facility there where we have invested tens of millions in assets, the revenues that are generated from that are certainly not going to be sufficient to cover both the capital replacement expenditures as well as the operating expenditures. So we have to look to some other solutions for that, and that is where this infrastructure needs should come in. With that, I think I have addressed most of I can remember.
Thank you, Andy. No cards, right, Dan? Anybody have anything further?
Yeah, I do.
Craig?
Gina, I just want to go back on this, because Ted, I'm not sure if I understood you correctly, if you didn't support it or not, and that was on the building official or plan check fees. Community development fees, we have an increase of $102,000 for plan check fees and permits. And then we have an expenditure, that cost of plan check services, $55,000. So it seems to me that department is, in this case, paying for itself, that it certainly would warrant additional help. If permits, fees, or permit application activity starts to slow down, then we can easily adjust those hours downward just to meet the need. So I'm still in support of getting building and safety the help they need with a building official or plan checker, however his category goes on that. And I'm sure overall budget-wise, you could probably do this faster than I. Would you be able to get to us whenever it's convenient a total cost of what we spend on public facilities? Whether it's whatever would fall under that, City Hall or Nellie Weaver Hall or the Sheriff's Station or the Community Center?
Capital improvements?
I guess it could be under that. But
The operating budget is part of 737, so it's inclusive of all public facilities. Sheriff, fire, community center, seniors.
So that would,
to some
would take
degree,
care of
some facilities
public
have a little bit of
facilities.
money for maintenance, but overall money is part of 737. That's all public facilities in the city. And I want to say it's about $800,000 annually is the operating budget for that.
Which obviously isn't near enough.
And that's just for operations and maintenance.
Okay. Or preventive maintenance.
Yeah, well, like all of our contract services are in there and that type of thing for plumbing, electrical, and all of that. The challenge is that even going back to the AC, using the AC units at Nellie Weaver Hall as an example, if you look in there, we're about $89,000 at mid-year. We're estimating we're going to be over to get to year end. So that's telling me those AC units, I could spend some more money and then I would maybe bring that back later, but I might be going to spend $140,000 over what I think because I'm limping things along to try and keeping it going, and so those contract costs go up. We have an aging system, whether it be the toilets don't flush or whatever, that's all part of that budget.
I believe we're on the same page. I mean, you and I can argue back and forth. On Nellie Weaver Hall, has that project been designed? Or is this a guesstimate?
I have contractors' numbers. So those are hard numbers that I have from a contractor. And I haven't, because I don't have the funding for it yet, I've also have a proposal from a mechanical engineer to make sure that all my specs meet what I need to do.
So we will still go out to bid on this project?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's a guesstimate.
Yeah, and by the way, that number also includes replacing the deck on that roof as well. That's all inclusive of that too. And that would go out to bid as well.
But this is like one contractor's best guess.
Or two contractors' best numbers. And I think they're fairly hard because I'm actually looking at carrier units and what those broke down to, but without having to bid it.
So there's a potential exists for a savings like we had. I mean,
potentially. Yeah, I always would think that, and we should be able to, hopefully, if we're going to make it competitive, then we're always going to get our best price out there. And whether that's 10% lower than that or whatever, I couldn't tell you.
Thanks, Brian. Andy, I'd like to have a discussion on, not tonight, say like Nellie Weaver Hall or Ingalls Park, how the fees that we charge to use, let's say Nellie Weaver's Hall, how do we know if we're not charging enough or too much or to maintain it?
Yeah,
we don't really know.
Yeah, we don't really know because that Nelly River by itself is not a cost center. We know how much we spend on the total facilities out there, including Ingalls, and how much revenues we bring in. I think Brian has indicated in the past that recovery rate is about 60%. Again, that's not something that we've sat down and actually looked at the numbers to say what that percentage is. But it certainly is below 100%.
And to add to that, I think if we were to look at my last business model, if I take out in the 737 budget, by the way, also Ingalls is included in that. But when I do my detail matrix, I break out each of the facilities, their cost and revenue generation to each of those facilities. But when I do it, where recovery is about 60% overall to what we spend at that facility. And the challenge we have is that we're getting requests for more bookings, but we don't have the personnel to stay with it. And there is infrastructure things that we need to stay on top of just to keep the facility to par. And it's simple things just to keep the facility usable. For example, Marino Arena has battery backup for emergency lighting because it requires an occupancy because of the bleachers. I just had to spend a bunch of money on replacement of those batteries, and about every 2 to 3 years, I'm spending about $10,000 or more on replacement because you can't replace 6 of them, you got to replace them all. And those type of things are part of what I call the fixed asset costs. I know they're going to be there, they're just going to be, but we're going to have those ongoing. And if I don't have those, then I don't get the rating for occupancy for that facility. So it changes the game a little bit. So, and also inclusive of that is replacement of the footing. All of those things are part of that budget. So, I do think and Andy and I have discussed taking a look at the event center as holistically. What does it bring in? What do the fees need to be? And maybe looking at how we look at that and what maybe needs to be adjusted through the fees or and those potential opportunities for revenues. To add back to the discussion related to naming rights, that was an opportunity also to not only generate revenue for infrastructure, but to help with operational costs as well.
I'll leave it at this, that you talk about the activity, Ingalls Park, booked all the time. Patty's doing a great job. We need more help up there, but we really don't know the costs. And it's like we can sell 1 billion hamburgers a year, but if we lose a nickel on each one, we're going to go out of business. Okay.
And to say that it is subsidized, probably at least 40 to 45%.
Thank you.
Kevin? Erwin, anything else? Robin? Brian, I do have one last thing, and that was, and Greg mentioned the help that Patty had, and this isn't in your budget reflected. I know that we hired her a helper, but he's no longer with us. And one of the things, and I think what we need to keep in mind, is our part-timers up there. That young man is going to get a job that's going to pay a whole heck of a lot more than what we're paying him here if he graduates in June. And we need to look at getting more help up there on those part-timers to get that. We can't hold off on it because you don't have all your volunteers there anymore. So with that, I'll entertain a motion. Somebody wants to make one? If not, I will. Move to approve this with the stipulation we bring back everything except the economic development naming rights and let that come back as a separate issue in a future meeting.
Okay, so we're approving, and the only thing we're not approving, except for the economic naming rights, which is coming back at a later meeting, correct?
If I may add something, and that is the issue with the building official increasing their hours to 8 hours.
Okay.
Or perhaps bringing them 4 hours, 2 days a week. I think the amount of money associated with that appears to be fairly within the margin of error, and we'll go ahead and implement that and without actually doing a budget amendment for that this night.
Thank you. Forgot that one.
I'm sorry, is that making a change on?
I'm just
No,
making
that's
that as a
separate?
note,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. All right, quickly, a roll call for a vote. Councilmember Newton? Councilmember Bash? Councilmember Hannah? Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer? And Mayor Hoffman?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passed 5-0.
All right. All right, it's getting close to 11. Let's get this thing done. The next one is approval of the memorandum of understanding between the City of Norco and the Norco Fair Committee. Oops, is that right?
I've got this, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before you is a memorandum of understanding between the city and the Norco Fair Committee, and this is for the annual parade that we do on Labor Day. I do note in here there are 3 basic community parades. There is the Norco Horse Week Parade, the Norco Fair Labor Day Parade, and we do have the Parade of Lights. This particular memorandum of understanding is between the city and the Norco Fair Committee. The Horse Week Parade is part of the actual lease agreement that we're doing with which will be coming up in the next agenda item as appendix item number B. And then the Parade of Lights is an annual parade in which we budget for as part of our special events budget. However, will be part of the annual budgeting for this. This particular agreement outlines the responsibility of both the city and the Fair Committee. The Fair Committee will be responsible for all administration, operations, and actually hosting the actual parades, including providing insurance for the parade, the advertisement, the management of the parade that day. What we agree to in this is that we will take care of all of the, what I call street closure and operational items that the Public Works Department has done when hosting these parades. That will be our responsibility. These parades, all of them in totality have, as you can see, 70 years, 50 years, 15 plus years, have been part of this community and really identify who we are and our character. I really believe that they have been a part of this community for a long time, and for us to sit down and actually take a look at being a partner with them on putting on this. Otherwise, these parades are really in jeopardy of not being able to be able to continue to go on if the city doesn't become a partner in this way. It's just become so uncost effective for them to do all of the other things as volunteer groups, but then yet have to pay for that operational part of it. So as a partner, we would identify these 3 parades, particularly in this memorandum. We would identify the Labor Day Parade, and this would be an agreement between us and the Fair Committee that we would provide all of the logistical assistance and delineation for closures for the parade, and they would put on the parade and do all of the other requirements that would be needed to host that parade. And with that, I'll conclude, and if there's any comments, I do want to make the comment that this was reviewed by our business committee. Mayor Hoffman and Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer were part of that committee and review with the Fair Committee.
Thank you, Brian. Anything from council, Kevin? Craig? Erwin? Robin? I don't have anything either. And public comments? No cards? All right.
No.
Keeping that in mind, do you have a motion to approve?
Second.
You have a first and a second?
You want to do on this one? I thought you wanted to do it the last one. He wants to comment on parades in general in the city, and being that the both items have that topic of sorts.
Yeah, let's do it on the next one, if it's all just on parades.
Okay. That's what I thought we agreed to, sorry. Roll call. Councilmember Newton?
Yes.
Councilmember Bash?
Yes.
Councilmember Hanna? Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer? And Mayor Hoffman?
Yes.
Thank you, motion passed 5-0.
All right, moving on to 7C. This is the 5-year lease and event agreement with the Norco Horse Week Committee for Norco Horse Week events and parade at the George Ingalls Equestrian Center. Is that you, Brian?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this before you tonight is a 5-year lease for an event agreement with the Norco Horse Week Committee. This would provide the George Ingalls Equestrian Event Center for the annual Horse Week events. We have been engaged in this event for a number of years with the Horse Week Committee, which is made up of all volunteers. The particular agreement here outlines our responsibilities as well as Horse Week's responsibility. For that, Horse Week would pay a lump sum fund fee of $8,500, which would go towards the direct cost of operating the annual Horse Week events. This would include any staffing costs from us, from the Parks Department, Fire, Police Department, and anything outside that may be part of that would be budgeted within the special events budget. The other part of this particular agreement is identified in the appendix, and that is dealing with the parade. And basically, that is an understanding of our role and responsibility as well as Horse Week's role and responsibility. Horse Week, in turn, with the parade, would manage, operate, and put on and host the parade. The city would then manage and be responsible for all closures and delineation of the parade. And that would stay in tune with what, in regards to what is needed. So the Public Works Department would then budget annually for this particular operation of the parade. The annual cost of hosting a parade runs, and this is for all of them, runs between $4,500 to $6,000. It changes a little bit based on Labor Day because there's a holiday in there, so cost for staffing is increased because it's a holiday pay. This particular lease agreement is for 5 years. It does allow for an additional 5-year renewal upon council's approval at the end of the first 5-year term. In addition to that, our business committee of staff, along with Mayor Pro Tem, as well as city manager, met with the committee to go over the annual event and to talk about the deal points of this lease agreement. I do want to make a point that Horse Week is a very unique type of event, and it brings about a lot of different activities to our community that has really been a part of it for 50 years. I think also one of the things that Horse Week also tries to do is what it does earn back, it tries to put back into the community, and they make decisions on what that would be every year other than what they would start up. It was started many years ago to coincide along with Easter, and because of Easter break, to give families an opportunity to do something locally at a very low cost. So when after the rodeo and you have all the events from the chili cook-off to quarter dip to horseshoes and all that, the costs are very nominal. So families can go out and enjoy and have recreational opportunities and community cultural activities that they can engage with. And that has been a tradition for this organization for 50 years. So with that, staff is recommending the approval of this 5-year agreement.
Thank you, Brian. I might add that additional language, which is not an agreement, into the Horse Week agreement, the city shall have the right at its choosing to have a community outreach booth at no fee during the annual Horse Week events to include the rodeo, correct? And that's Tony, that's agreeable to you, correct? Okay. All right, with that being now, Greg, got anything? Berwin? Robin, nothing? Okay, you have the cards?
Yes, Mr. Robert Quintero.
Good evening, Robert.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council member. I want to thank you for allowing me to be here. Just, I'm a representative of Charros del Rio. We participate in your parades every Horse Week, Labor Day, and a lot of people have called me that they heard that there's a possibility of not having parades here in town. Most of us here with Charros del Rio, as you folks have seen us, I mean, we have little kids doing trick with their ropes. We take a lot of pride in what we do, representing a long tradition. I mean, with our animals, with our outfits, saddles, everything, and we were kind of, for a bit, we were a little depressed that there was a possibility of not having parades, but hopefully you folks could help us continue the parades here in Norco. We have also participated in other parades throughout Southern California, and we would definitely appreciate if you consider the sponsoring of the parades. Like I said, most of us are Norco residents. I've been here in Norco since 1988, work here in the community since 1987 when we moved here from Corona, company that I work with. Kevin knows. I may. But again, please take those things in consideration. I mean, it's a tradition here in Norco, and we really look forward to being in the parade for Horse Week and Labor Day.
Thank you, Robert. As you can see, we already passed the two for
thank you.
for the fair, and we're working here on Horse Week. If you saw here earlier, this is a tradition, and we're not going to throw 50 and 75 years out the window.
We appreciate it, and I will definitely let our people know, because a lot of people have been asking me, a lot of calls, a lot of people that I see around town in church and everything, and they've been concerned. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other cards?
No, that was the only one.
Close the public hearing, bring it back to council. Greg, anything else? Got a first and a second?
Okay, roll call. Councilmember Newton. Councilmember Bash. Yes. Councilmember Hanna. Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer. Yes. And Mayor Hoffman.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passed 5-0.
All right. I know, it's getting late. All right, City Council, City Manager, Staff, Communications. Start down there, Greg, anything?
I'm not going to let them get off this easy. Okay, Chad, quick little story, and you're going to guess what the question is. You can take this room, and you can fill it with 2x4s, nails, hammers, and monkeys. They will not build anything, okay? But you can take this same room and fill it with paint, paintbrushes, and monkeys, and they will paint this room. What do you think my question is? And why isn't it done after our third meeting or fourth meeting we've talked about it?
Are they going to paint it well?
Just takes a monkey. I don't care.
You're talking about the wall on North, I assume. Yep. I do have a quote from that. I'm doing a PO on it and going to authorize the contractor to go do the work. So it'll be done, and hopefully, certainly within the next 30 days, unless they have other obligations. But it's, again, hiring Brightview, and again, until I do the PO and get their timeline, I can't specifically tell you when it's going to be done, but the process is moving forward.
They can't provide a schedule?
Not at this time yet, because I haven't given the PO to get them a start date. But it'll get done, sir. I promise. I know you've been asking for it, but
do we know when they're going to start the monument sign?
That process, they're almost finishing all their submittals because they're doing the work of kind of clarifying certain key points regarding the how it was designed and getting some clarifications on that. So we're getting the near end of that. So I did give them the deadline that it has to start no later than the end of this month. and that's without exception. So hopefully it starts sooner, but we're getting close to finishing all the submittals.
Okay. Andy, I'd like to have a schedule on these 2 items from you, when they'll be completed. California North, the painting, and California North, the monument sign.
Provide your schedule.
And then I have a question for you. At 6th and Valley View, what our policy is, because maybe I don't understand it. At 6th and Valley View, the Century 21 building has had graffiti on it for, would you say 3 weeks at least, Chad? Since that farmer's market? I think it's 3.
It's getting close.
Okay. At least 3 weeks more graffiti being added to it. And I thought kind of our policy was code enforcement goes out, takes a photograph of it, gives it to Eric, however that works, and then we give them a notice. Isn't it like 48 hours?
I have a very short time period.
Yeah, something like you got 48 to clean it up, or we're going to clean it up for you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm going to say we're approximately at 3 weeks at this. And it hasn't been touched, but it's been added on to.
Was it there today?
Yep.
But I thought I saw some white paint on that building there today.
That's to cover the previous.
Well, I thought they'd painted all of it.
Now, unless it was after 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Andy says he's going to have city staff verify that tomorrow. Okay, thank you.
But I went by it this morning and this afternoon. I went back and forth and it was still there. All right.
We'll check on that. We'll get it checked on tomorrow, Steve. Thank you. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Kevin?
That was Monkey, lawyer, and me? Was that who he was referring to? Just asking.
Anything? Nothing? You good? Berwin, anything else?
No, sir.
Robin? No. One of the things that we were asked to agendize something for next future council meeting, because both parties are represented by attorneys, we just can't. So I'll leave that to that answer at that point until their attorneys tell us we can. With that, Eric, anything?
Nothing, sir.
Gina?
Just to reiterate, a big thank you to our financial advisor for the bond refunding and the timing of everything. We were kind of exhausted early in January when the team brought forward the proposal and said, okay, we're going to go for it. And Andy is a big part of that. So we're just very lucky we have an excellent team for that. And then in terms of mid-year, I want to thank everybody. They've worked hard since December on this, and it's a team effort. And then finally, you'll be receiving, I think, some probably calendar invites or suggestions for the budget process and the workshops coming forward. Same timeline as last year. And that'll be it.
Thank you, Brian. Steve? Chad? Matt, anything? You get this machine worked, okay?
Actually, I did want to comment. There is a tech support scam going on right now where somebody pretends to be from Microsoft or an antivirus company and they ask for remote access into your computer. Don't give them access to your computer unless you know it's like a trusted person, such as like an IT tech, such as us, or if you're not sure about the information, ask for contact information. That way you can verify that they are who they say they are. So just wanted to vocalize that as well. So
thank you. Dan?
I just want to thank you all for your patience with me.
You did a good job. Thank you.
Have a good morning.
Before I,
Nope.
Andy, anything less?
Yes, I'd like to report a concern that was expressed at the last city council meeting with respect to waste management. And that concern was that waste management may not be meeting their obligations with respect to reporting requirements and perhaps financial obligations in terms of value of services provided. I reached out to West Management to collect some data. But first of all, let me go back to the reporting requirements. I think there was an impression created at the last City Council meeting that West Management was to report back to the ad hoc committee that assisted in the negotiation of the franchise agreement on a periodic basis. That is not correct. There is nowhere in that contract or where it was contemplated that West Management was to report back to the ad hoc committee. The periodic reporting requirements that's required of West Management is to report back to the City Council in terms of their progress with respect to technological improvements in manure to energy conversion. So that is the only thing that they are required to report on a periodic basis. With respect to the financial commitments to the city, here's the information provided by West Management is that in 2017, they made contributions to 19 organizations or in support of activities here in the city of Norco that totaled approximately $29,000. West Management currently provides free services to 22 city facilities. That includes all city parks and buildings. And the value of that services based on the trips they make is about $237,000 on an annual basis. So that is fairly close to the amount that was discussed as part of the franchise agreement, keeping in mind that is not a requirement in the contract, other than they were supposed to provide free services to all city facilities. There wasn't a requirement that those services and donations and contributions equal a minimum amount to the city.
Got it?
Yes.
Thank you, Andy. I'd like to close this meeting out or adjourn this meeting in the name of Reverend Billy Graham, who at 99 years old passed away today. He has sad loss for our country and the religious people of our world. So with that, adjourned.